Hello everybody and welcome back once again to yet another addition to my journey through One Piece. Today we have the big one, Marineford. Before we get into anything, just a couple of things. We're experiencing a bit of a heat spike in southern Canada right now, so that's why I've got the door open there, the window open in the back. Sorry, the color balance might be a little bit off because of that, but it is kind of sweltering in my computer room right now, so that's what we're working with. Apologies about that, but it shouldn't impact the video at all. Another thing is, I just got finished streaming, and I'm just coming out of feeling a little under the weather, so my voice may be a little bit off or rougher than usual. Sorry about that. One more thing is I recorded this video already. Unfortunately, the audio was corrupted. It just didn't work. You couldn't hear me properly. It was all digital and weird, so I had to scrap that. So I'm very disappointed about that, but hopefully I'll be able to capture all the points I did get, and maybe even in a better way. Maybe something good can come out of this. So yeah, just so you're aware of that. One thing to let you guys know about is that today, because Marineford is Marineford, I just don't really want to do the AJPiece comments right away. I'll leave them for the end of video. For this video. And actually, let me know how you feel about it. Let me know how the structure is. I don't think it really matters much because I put chapters in the video for like, these are the AJPiece comments in case you want to skip them, and you can very easily navigate through them if you don't want to see them. But let me know if there's any difference between having them at the end of the video versus the beginning. For today, I just really want to dive right into it without talking about the AJPiece comments, because it's Marineford. Crazy that we're here, talking about this arc. I've known of it, but, you know, the reputation somehow still didn't live up to how I felt experiencing it. This is One Piece's best arc. This is the best the stories have been up until this point. It is my favorite. I have no qualms about saying that. I adore Skypiea. I adore Water 7 and Enies Lobby. For me, this is just different. This just hits different. For a bunch of different reasons. A lot of having to do with the presentation and art. A lot having to do with the scale and the way that this arc could only hit in this way for this specific series. But also for the character work, for the writing of characters that were not super fleshed out up until this point. Whitebeard being one, Garp being another, those two are huge. Ace, huge. Crocodile, Sir Crocodile gets a ton of stuff. Akainu, a new entry. Sengoku, nice little touches from Mihawk. Seeing Kobe and, Shanks, oh my god. I can't wait to talk about this stuff. Now, I know we're here to talk about Marineford, but just a reminder, if you would like early access to the next video, where we will talk about post-war, the post-war arc, where some amazing stuff happens there as well, you can do so by subscribing to my Patreon under the $5 tier. Now, straight to Marineford. So while this arc is a bunch of spectacle, and it's awesome in that way, and badass legendary moments, and just iconic spreads all over the place, there is lots of little work, little touches done to substantiate a lot of the characters in a beautiful way. But in terms of themes, there's a common idea throughout this arc. That being symbols, legends, people who are these iconic, monolithic symbols of eras, and the person behind the symbol, specifically Whitebeard. We have Whitebeard, the introduction of this generational, iconic to me, one of the all-time shonen characters to me. This man is a legend, but what's very clearly dwelt upon in the subtext, a little bit in the text, but it's made clear throughout, is that Whitebeard is this symbol, is this person to rally around, is this embodiment of strength. But he's also, because of that symbol status, a little bit lonely, a little bit burdened in moments. Now, I'm sure he wouldn't change that. I'm sure he wouldn't change it for the world, and he would want to fight for those to carry on the torch after him. I don't think he'd change his mind for being the symbol. But nonetheless, it is lonely at times. It burdens him. It torments him a little bit. And that is the man behind the symbol. We're going to get into specifics about that later on, because Oda does some great stuff here. Fantastic stuff. But just generally, that is a theme that is dwelt upon through Whitebeard. Also, Roger. We hear about the beautiful byproducts of Roger ushering in this new pirate era. The positives we see through Luffy and the kindred spirits that are inspired by Goldie Roger. But there are lots of negatives about it as well. We learn about them through Jinbei, because not every pirate is as good as Luffy. Luffy is a rare breed of pirate, and what Roger does here is incite a revolt from all pirates. He empowers all pirates, and that is exceedingly negative in some circumstances. For every Luffy, there's a Blackbeard. And so, while Roger is this symbol, this iconic symbol of One Piece, you can't have One Piece without Goldie Roger. There are also these byproducts, these darker aspects that maybe he wasn't thinking of or just didn't care when he ushered in this new era. We learn a bit about the man. Slowly throughout the series, we've been learning about the man behind the legend, and I hope that continues. He continues to be fleshed out more and more throughout the series. And also, part of the man behind the symbol is that he was despised for what he brought forth by the common folk, by the non-pirates. And this has caused a trickling down knock-on effect on Ace. Ace lived a cursed childhood because of his ties to his father, Goldie Roger. And that is another bit of a dark layer to the character. Not intentionally, of course. He tried to help Ace, and he did, through what he asked Garp. And so I'm not saying that Roger's a horrible person for this, but nonetheless, a bit of a low-key, under-discussed element to Roger that is a bit of a footnote behind the legend of the man. Ace has felt the negatives of Roger, of being his son, in great effect. And speaking of Ace, that's the last key to this theme for me. Ace throughout the series, up until Impel Down-ish, has felt to me like this symbol, this confident, very outgoing, just generally admirable sort of person, full of confidence, full of strength, mental and physical strength, and just unflappable. He seemed secure. He seemed like he just loves life and takes it on, and unbothered, you know? That's the impression I got of Ace prior to these chapters, these arcs. But that was the symbol that was kind of shown to us. Behind that, the man himself is deeply tormented. He grew up not knowing if he deserved to exist until the connections he made helped substantiate and validate his existence. So the man behind that symbol was tormented. He was not as confident as we might have assumed from Alabasta. So another theme right here, echoed through three major characters, Ace, Whitebeard, and Goldie Roger. But also, everyone's here in terms of thematics. There are so many characters here, and yet no Straw Hats, which is awesome. Really cool stuff, really bold, really courageous for Oda to take that step and substantiate these characters who needed it. There could have been a bit of a risk of making the Straw Hats too prominent, and the other characters outside of them a little too weak in comparison, making the cast a little bit imbalanced. But he does away with the Straw Hats completely in one of the most iconic arcs in the series, if not the most. This is incredible stuff in Marineford for all the other characters, and it builds upon connections and character foundations from the past. Like, we see Moria here and we know his history, and that gives the little lines he gives so much substance. We see Mihawk and his interactions with someone like Moria or Doflamingo, and it's just, these characters have been built up for 500-something chapters, and we know their characterization, we know their backstory, but not a lot of them have interacted in this way, in this sort of arena, in this way. And so because of that gradual build-up of, oh, we'll see Shanks for a chapter, and then we won't see him for 100, and then we'll see Garp, and then we won't see him for a while, only in cover stories, etc. That build-up is so key to this, because there's so many cool, emotional, interesting dynamics throughout this that are made so substantial because of this build-up. So this arc could only work like this in One Piece. Everyone plays a role in some way. I will say off the top of my head, off the bat, I have one disappointment with this arc, and that is that Smoker being there in this arc, he doesn't have much material. Honestly, he doesn't have a ton of character substance in this arc specifically. It was great to see him, he had a couple of great lines, but I wanted a bit more for him, so I am a little disappointed about that, but who knows, maybe in a future arc coming up soon, he'll get more substantiated, he'll get more stuff, and this complaint will be rendered invalid because of that. But as it stands now, that's how I feel. But so many characters are elevated from this. Akainu, we just meet him already, a really interesting character. Sengoku gets some really interesting layers to him. Blackbeard, this was the arc where I fully bought into Blackbeard, I think, as a really good character. I liked him before, he was interesting. This arc really showed me his role and why he's so necessary to the story. Whitebeard is the star of the show. Garp, unbelievable. Ace, I've listed a few of them already, but needless to say, there is no risk of this character imbalance towards the Straw Hats. In fact, I mean, you're going to see the character ranking at the end of this video. Quite a few Straw Hats are behind quite a few other characters. Which ones? You'll have to wait and see. But Doflamingo had some great stuff too. Oh my god, I'm getting ahead of myself. But really, every arc here plays a huge role. Every arc is additive. It adds more richness and depth and breadth and palpable texture to the themes at play here, to these coalescing characters, to these payoffs. Every character has a connection. I mentioned Moria, for instance, and his reaction to Ors Jr., who's friends with Ace from Whitebeard's crew as well. Just little details like that. They're all over the place, and they wouldn't be there if Oda didn't deliberately, slowly, gradually build upon these dynamics and foundations in the way that he does for this epic long-running format. There's also Shanks paying respect to Whitebeard when they meet quite a while ago, in large part due to what he did for Ace, as well as respect, but that as well. Very cool, recontextualizing earlier stuff. Another theme is how little acts of courage and kindness and compassion, the little touches, goes such a long way in changing the world. This world is corrupt. This world is full of unsavory things and cruelty and, like I said, corruption and all these horrible things. But little acts of bravery, of standing up for what's right, genuinely do impact the world, because what happened? We have Kobe, one of the weakest characters in this arc, strength-wise, standing up to a Kainu, arguably the most strong, maybe outside of Whitebeard. One of them for sure. I can't power scale, sorry. But he stands up to a Kainu, knowing that he's going to die, but standing up for what's right, saying, stop this cruelty, this madness, it's too much. And a Kainu, as you would expect, I would be very disappointed if in this moment a Kainu went, hold up, you're right. You know what? This is bad. I don't want to do this anymore. You're right, Kobe, and stopped. Obviously, he's not going to do that because Oda's a good writer. He's not going to write him like that, and that's because that's stupid. But what he does here is just go, what the hell? Who is this kid? Huh. Anyways, and goes to kill him again, but it delays him for a few seconds, and that causes Shanks to come in. And that courage, that building of courage, exemplified through Kobe's strength and bravery, is what can change the world. Because added up, quite literally in this way, it can prevent a full-scale war, full-scale death, as Shanks did. Beautiful thematic presentation there. I can't stop thinking about it. It is wonderful stuff. A huge thing here is also Luffy's connection with Shanks, which I'll talk about later. But if you think about it, so many little acts of bravery, throughout this arc. If Ace hadn't stopped Akainu's blow, if Jinbei hadn't come in and grabbed Luffy, if Buggy had not helped transport them further, would Kobe's few seconds have done enough? No. Everything did their part to delay Akainu just enough for Shanks to come in. And that is exceptionally beautiful. That's one of the most beautiful things in the story. But in terms of the presentation, this arc is phenomenal. Spreads all over the place. In terms of this presentation, I think it's the best One Piece has ever been. And there are some huge highs before this. Skypiea, Water 7 Enies Lobby, Sabaudi. There's some huge highs. But the amount of spreads here, Oda was going insane. But like I said, there are little panels as well. From the start, I don't know if you guys remember from my chapter, my first One Piece video, I talked about how One Piece dwelled on the little moments, the little expressions, the tiny panels. And there is so much of that. For every huge war-torn spread, for every fiery explosion, for every sword fight, this epic battle, there is a small panel of Whitebeard shedding a tear, or Whitebeard gathering himself, or a little smile from Ace, or a little expression of pain from Garp. Things like that. They really are just as important as the double-page spreads. The presentation is out of this world here, and it does so much to accentuate the scope and occasion, but also the characters. Now, in terms of the covers, Oda is peak cuteness here. They are so cute. There are some really insanely wholesome covers here of a lot of the Straw Hats who we don't see. Just very beautiful, very cute, very endearing covers to kind of break up the intense tone of the arc in a really nice way. These are some of my favorite covers out there, and I wonder myself if Oda needed a bit of a break from the intensity to put together these covers, because, you know, it would make sense if he did. But the contrast is really effective, kind of hilarious, but also very effective. Like, there's this bloody war, And then there's this really cute cover of Robin with butterflies. You know, I love it. I love it. I'm not criticizing that at all. I think that's great. But to go chronologically now into the actual events we have here, it's just been proclaimed by Sengoku, the agenda here. Ace is Goldie Roger's son, and we now know that he needs to be killed because the heir of Goldie Roger living, it's bad news for them. It is a rallying cry for pirates even more so, and they need him dead. They need this bloodline killed, finished. And that adds substance to the corruption of Ace's imprisonment. Because we see here, of course, there are lots of other reasons, but the main reason they want to detain and arrest and kill and execute Ace is because he's Roger's son. Not specifically because he did any huge crime that deserves being executed, because he's Roger's son. And that is the corruption here. I had a couple of people asking me in the Impel Down video, what's the corruption you speak of when it comes to Ace's imprisonment? Because he's a pirate. They take in pirates. And yeah, I get that. As always, I didn't explain myself to the absolute best of my abilities. I would have scripted it differently. But my point is that the world government are corrupt. Robin's a great example of why I don't trust their judgment when it comes to taking people in because of their standards of piracy. Yes, they label these people as pirates, but they would have killed Robin for absolutely nothing because of who she is. Same thing for Ace. That is corruption. That is an unlawful execution. And yes, Ace is absolutely a pirate, but the way I look at it is they're the ones setting those standards, as I've talked about before. And their track record, given the way they fudge history and curtail the narrative to fit their own needs and fudge things for their own needs, I don't trust him. Sure, Ace is a pirate, but he's in prison here primarily because he's Roger's son. And that is too much. That is too much. However, we are given a lot of interesting substance for the point of view of people like Garp, Sengoku, the world government at large, and it does make it a little gray, which I was really glad about, and I'll talk about that later in the video. And Whitebeard makes his appearance. At long last, the build-up, the ominous nature of his absence, the man is here. And I'm not gonna lie, at this moment I was like, I'd be disappointed if this guy wasn't a good character. Holy shit was I not disappointed. Whitebeard is fantastic, but he comes here to save Ace, and Ace calls out for him. He calls out for his pops. And it's funny. We get a little bit of a scene as Ace, or as Luffy and co. are making their way towards Marineford. And they get let in, by the way. They get let in, which is really interesting. We'll talk about that later too. But then he just randomly drops it. Oh yeah, Ace is Goldie Roger's son. And everyone goes, holy shit, what? So he knew this the whole time, but just didn't say it because there was no real need to. It didn't come up. And he was also protecting Ace's secret, but he realizes here, I kind of gave that away, whoops. So it's just a funny little moment that I found fitting, you know? It's very in keeping with Luffy, as is the slip-up. But Whitebeard storms in, and he's using his insane powers to sort of just crack these glass cracks in reality. I can't even describe it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Amazing power, presented beautifully, spreads all over the place that really enhance this guy's authority. This power, it just lends itself to an aesthetic that is so overwhelmingly authoritative. Then we get a bit of a flashback with Ace that gets filled in more later down the line, but nonetheless, he remembers his adventures in the Grand Line. He talks with Shanks after knowing Luffy's ties to Shanks, and then he gets inducted into Whitebeard's crew. He tried to kill Whitebeard various times throughout, and ultimately was taken in spite of that, and found his home, found his family. He became a commander, and we get context from the Impel Down panel, where Whitebeard reaches out to him, saying that they'll terrorize the seas together. This is after Ace had unsuccessfully tried to kill him multiple times. And then Ace recalls when Thatch, one of the crew members, was killed by Blackbeard. This plan of Blackbeard's, holy shit, we'll get into that. But right here, he decides here that he wants to go and avenge Whitebeard's honor. Not only Thatch, obviously, because he was killed, but Whitebeard's honor. This act from Blackbeard spit on Whitebeard's principles, and he couldn't stand that. He couldn't stand this affront to Whitebeard's honor, and so he goes out, and that's why he was searching for Blackbeard this whole time. Now, to jump ahead a little bit, I've heard that people criticize Ace's death as him being overly stupid, and so it's written poorly because Akainu was taunting and calling Whitebeard a loser, and he had to defend his pride. But two things. Firstly, what has this series been about from the very start? Heart over reason, principles, ideals, pride. That is what a lot of these characters act in service of, rather than life, and that is exactly what Ace did here. That is what Luffy does, that is what Zoro does, that is what Ace does here. And we see he's been like this for ages. He chases after Blackbeard because of this affront to Whitebeard's honor, to his principles, to his code, to his family. So it's consistent characterization, and a character doing something that isn't quote-unquote logical isn't a flaw. And after seeing this flashback, Ace says, you know, this is all my fault. I'm sorry for getting captured. Get away. He's worried about them being killed, being in trouble here. But Whitebeard very much has that aura of, my son's problems are my own. We'll all stick together. And Whitebeard says they're all culpable, they're all family, they're all his sons. And Ace tries to argue, but they all say, like, no one touches a member of our crew and gets away with it. And in the midst of this, Marco, who I really like, Marco's a great right-hand man to Whitebeard, says, Whitebeard just goes like, no, I don't remember the exact words, but he essentially says the culpability lies with them. Isn't that right, Marco? And Marco goes, yeah, that's right. Through these flashbacks, it's clear, and through his acts in the arc, Marco's very astute, very wise, experienced, savvy, and loyal. A really cool minor character. Then Whitebeard attacks, there are tsunamis all over the place, the spreads again, the scale, and the Summit War, I guess what is eventually called the Paramount War, begins at Marineford. Now, it was here where I had been, as you know from the Impel Down video, speculating about a death. It's funny because I thought that Ace, there was maybe an inevitability to it, a tragic inevitability, a huge blow for Luffy, all the stuff I talked about in my last video, but I also thought it could be potentially Whitebeard because they mention his death outright in an earlier chapter about how it would change the world. And so I was always going, is it going to be Ace or is it going to be Whitebeard? Without really understanding that it was going to be both. That was a nasty little subversion by Oda. But it was right here where I became confident that Whitebeard would die. This man, this legend, he comes in and he completely destroys everything. He is feared. He is, the moment Whitebeard decides he needs to do something, I'll quiver in his wake, because he is just that much of a legend of a man. He is just supreme. And having this sort of character on your side almost feels like a bit of a cheat code. He has such impact in the chapters he's in, but because he was so strong, both physically, in terms of his power, and as a character, he just felt to me like the classic high impact but low screen time character. So upon seeing this, I went, you know what, this guy's gonna die, I'm quite sure of it. But that means I'm going to soak in every second. Also, like I said before, the world's government needs they need to take a W. They've been taking too many L's. So killing this guy, that would be huge for them. And for the longevity of the series, it makes sense that they get that W. But there are I can't even voice out what happens in these fights. Whitebeard causes these tsunamis to occur. Aokiji freezes them. Whitebeard's pirates come out. Mihawk joins the fray or wants to join the fray. Jozu comes in. Oh boy. Jozu has become a little bit of a meme on my channel. He's become a bit of a meme in my Twitch streams. I'm not going to expand upon why, but if you know, you know. Jozu's fine. He's whatever. He's a character. Kizaru joins the fray. Marco stops him. Everyone's showing out, and it's awesome stuff. And notably, it's pointed out to me, this whole time Whitebeard does not move, and the whole time he's smiling and confident. That symbol. Nothing's wrong because I'm here. A bit of a My Hero Academia parallel. Marco is shown to have this zone devil fruit, that turns him into this like blue and green phoenix thing. Really cool. He goes up against Kizaru, there's all sorts of skirmishes, and then Akainu comes in with his enormous firepower, his fist, the way it's presented, especially in the color spreads, unbelievable. And it's drawn in a different way that gives a little bit of a different aura to Akainu's powers. Like, he feels, just through these illustrations, like his fire powers are more powerful than Ace. Even completely getting rid of the context of the two characters, which it makes sense that Akainu would be stronger than Ace, just visually, it feels hotter, more powerful, more catastrophic than Ace's powers. Then we bring forth Orange Jr., who I talked about before, this great friend of Ace's and on Whitebeard's crew, and a device for immense tragedy. in the arc as well. But he wants to save his friend Ace. Again, showing what I liked about this is a lot of Ace's character up until this point had been fixated on his dynamic with either Whitebeard or Luffy, his dynamic with two other characters. There wasn't a ton about Ace the person at this point, and his connection with Oars Jr. is a great way of showing who he is as a person. Before that would be substantiated further later. But yeah, Oars Jr., clearly Oars' progeny, accepted as part of the Whitebeard crew, and again, Moria sees him and wants him later, wants to add him to his collection. Great stuff. And then we get this little cut to Doflamingo, who says he's starting to get excited. And here I was just kind of going, I was kind of thinking about Doflamingo a lot, because this guy he loves to revel. He loves to, we'll talk more about him in a bit, but just to kind of break the ice on him a little bit, he loves to revel in the flimsiness of justice, in the flimsiness of ideals, and how people can go from one side to the other, how volatile history is, how it flip-flops depending on the victors, all that sort of thing. He's very much a jester in the vein of Kimberly from FMAB, Gilgamesh from Fate Zero, in certain ways Periston or Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter. I made a video about jesters, you can check it out if you'd like. But yeah, he's very much a jester in that way, sort of balancing a lot of different viewpoints and commenting about them, upon them like a choir, a classically Greek choir. He's very cool in that way. But it made me think here, like, this guy is kind of insane. He revels in this chaos. He loves it. He laps it up. So, like, why is he here? Why is he a warlord? The best thing I could come up with was that the world government offers him a chance to see this, to have a front row seat and see all of this. And I'm not going to spoil certain things that we learn later just yet. That may be in the next video, but while that's part of it, we learn there's more to his character, and I wasn't surprised about that, because there seemed to be more. Boa enters the fray, Boa Hancock. I apologize, I know some of you guys were saying in my Amazon Lily video that it's a little confusing that I say Boa, given that her sisters are also named Boa. Sorry, it's just how it works in my brain. Hopefully, like, the vast majority of the time I say Boa, it's going to be referring to Hancock, so hopefully that's not a big deal. There's this lovely frame as Boa's taking out these Whitebeard pirates, playing her role, right? Where, I think it might be a spread, I don't remember exactly, but her leg is up as she's doing like a little bit of a twirl, and the spread is composed around her upturned leg, her kicked up leg, and her body, her long slender frame. It's a great use of character design in compositing this spread. I thought it was really cool. But Boa does her stuff before later on some friendly fire, and the Marines ask her whose side she's on, and she says she's only on the side of one man, the one who really saved her. Everyone's the same in her eyes except for him, Luffy. We get some extra characterization for Ace as we see how he made this hat for Oars. A bit of Luffy parallel as well, how their friendship developed. And it's all really touching, it's all really sweet. And again, more good substance for Ace as a character outside of his connections with the other two. And Oars is making his way towards Ace, recalling all this kindness. He waited in the snow, sleet, and hail with this straw hat on to wait it out because he loved that hat, and he loved being a part of this this crew, and he loved Ace. And it's very touching. And then Doflamingo comes out of nowhere and cuts off his leg and goes, so much fun. This guy, what is this arc offered a lot of cool substance and potential and extended the ceiling, I think, of Doflamingo, but I want some more. He's this jester, he's this huge chaos factor, and it makes me think back to what he said during Sabaody, I believe, about the Age of the Smile. With Whitebeard's era gone, maybe there will be this Age of the Smile. What does he mean? Anyways, Oars stops just short of Ace, cut off, and the pain that Ace must be going through seeing what all these people are doing to get to him. It's unbelievable. Now, chapter 556 is the iconic Doflamingo line, and this chapter is entitled Justice Will Prevail. The battle continues, with Oars Jr. down, spreads all over the place, everything continues as they try to make their way over towards Ace, and then Doflamingo says he's fighting with this guy named Water Buffalo Atmos, and he says, a line that I've seen in a lot of my videos, people have actually quoted this line in my videos, and I had forgotten about it, but I've seen it. I think in my Death Note video, people have quoted Doflamingo, where he says, are the pirates the good guy, or the bad guys, excuse me? Are the Navy the good guys? Things like that change with the seasons. Kids who have never known peace and kids who have never known war have completely different ideas of right and wrong. It is the job of those on top to decide what's good and what's evil. Right now, it can go either way. justice will prevail? Of course it will, because the side of justice will be whoever wins. So history is written by the victors, said in this beautifully chaotic way, as he observes the flimsiness of justice and narratives and rewriting history and perspective. There is an ironic amount of empathy, not necessarily in Doflamingo, but in the viewpoint. Kids who have never known peace and kids who have never known war have different perspectives. So their lives, the lives they lead, their view of the worlds are totally different, which not a lot of people, not a lot of antagonists in this series seem to understand, yet he does. Either way, this history written by the victors idea, really cool, and integrates with the narration of chapter 550, when the Marineford War is being laid out, and it's the language is very complimentary towards the world government. It just reminded me about that, and it made me think, who's commentating this? Who's narrating this? Because they seem to have been the victor, and they seem to have been overwriting history, overwriting justice. But he would know better than everyone, right? He would know better than anyone, this flimsiness, because he's part of the world government, these people who rewrite everything, who are corrupt down to the bone, despite their existence being a necessity in some ways. Again, it is gray, I will talk about that later, but nonetheless, really cool stuff for Doflamingo here. And it also made me think about the era of the smile. Will the flimsiness of justice help him? That knowledge, even just that function, help him to bring forth the era of the smile? Will this knowledge of history and justice, will it stand him in good stead in the future? We'll see. But Garp in the middle of this, who I have not mentioned too much in terms of the chronological story just yet, at this moment sits down next to Ace, and he says his job is for the Marines, the Navy, but this is family, so what does he do? He's deeply conflicted. And at this moment, I could understand the viewpoint of people who would say, right, it's your job, but really, it's your family, how could you go against them? But I think you really have to put yourself in his perspective and understand a lot of the moving pieces with regards to piracy and what Roger really let loose. And again, sorry to tease, but we'll talk about that soon. But he reflects about Ace not becoming a Marine. He laments it and says, if only you had done that, you wouldn't be in this position, because he cares for him so much and just wants him to be okay. Garp really loves his grandsons. He really does. He cares so much, he's crying here, and he's so conflicted. And while he's one of the most morally dubious characters in the series, and some can criticize his grandparenting style at times, he is one of the best characters in this story. And Marineford really shows the conflict of this character, and the beauty, and it helps inform us on a lot of the world government's role in the story. But just as we're seeing this, Luffy and the rest of them fall down from out of the sky, and someone pointed out to me in my chat something ingenious. Doflamingo said that it's the job of those on top to decide. Luffy falls down from on high. That cosmic luck, right? Will he decide? But Luffy and his friends, all the Impel Down people who have come from Impel Down, they join the fray, and there's this spread. It's amazing. It looks like a movie poster. Everyone's here except the Straw Hats. But the reactions to Luffy are really great. Really contrasting, really variable. So Luffy comes down like this. He yells out, delighted to see Ace, and what's tragic is Ace is horrified to see him, seeing that he's in danger now. That would come back to bite in a little later on in a big way. But there's also Boa. She swoons. Mori is furious. Mihawk just goes like, never a dull moment with you, huh? Kizaru, Aokiji, they take it in, they see him. Doflamingo's excited by Luffy. And Smoker sees Luffy coming in with Crocodile, and he's just going, interesting combo. What the hell has happened since Alabasta? Put yourself in his position, that must be crazy. Now Crocodile has obvious ambitions to take down Whitebeard, but as he begins to do that, Luffy says to stop because he's close to Ace. Now, Whitebeard sees Luffy's hat, he remembers Shanks, he remembers what Shanks said about giving up his arm for the sake of a new era, and he puts it together and sees that Luffy is that hope for the new era. And that is key, because his outlook towards Luffy would be amazingly important going forward. And they have a little bit of a back and forth. Luffy doesn't really care about reputation, he just talks to Whitebeard as he tends to do, like he's his equal. He's like, I know you want to be Pirate King, but that's me. No, that's me, you know? And Whitebeard kind of grins and takes it in, and he's just like, I think he likes him. I think he adheres himself to him. There's a friendly competition as they're going I'll save Ace, no, I'll save Ace, and the energy is very empowering, and it feels like I was getting swept up in optimism at this point, while also thinking, Whitebeard's gonna die eventually, but Ace is gonna be saved, right? But Luffy and Whitebeard here kind of team up. They decide to team up, and what I love is this Buggy, who has been talking big this entire time, seeing the scale of what he's about to take on, kind of panics, and he's like, oh, actually, I don't know about this. Very in character, I really like that. Luffy then tells Whitebeard that the plan for Ace to be executed is moved ahead of schedule, which, I mean, Whitebeard's literally at their doorstep. I think it makes sense that they're not going to stand on ceremony and wait. So yeah, it makes sense, but the confirmation from Luffy is apt. And in this moment, everyone's kind of looking at Luffy in awe and going, whoa, he's talking to Whitebeard like he's his equal. That's just Luffy. No standing on ceremony, no care about reputation. That's who he is. But Moria's going off with his shadow zombies. Hina's fighting as well. Hina's here. Kizaru has his light show going off. Luffy's going through all sorts of enemies. And Ace here very tragically tells Luffy, go home. I don't need to be freed by you. You have your own life. You have your own adventures. Kind of alluding back to all the way in Alabasta when he was glad that Luffy had his own family now, the Straw Hats. And he says, there's no place for you in my life. This is such a feeble attempt to get Luffy to go away. Everyone can see right through it. It's so feeble. It reminds me a little bit of Robin in Enies Lobby, because he tries to get him to back away, and then Luffy ultimately says, I don't care, I'm gonna save you. To both of them in those situations. It's an admirable attempt from Ace, but very feeble, because no one's buying what he's selling there. He loves Luffy. And Luffy says, I'm your brother, and we get a cut to this image of when they were kids, this cup they shared, this signifier that they were brothers because they drank from the same cup. Beautiful, beautiful little flashes of imagery, exemplifying their bond really well. And Luffy says here that he doesn't care about pirate rules when it comes to him and his brother. He doesn't care about that, which is interesting. Kind of stick a pin in that, because that may be an indicator of something that happens in his flashback later in the post-war arc, because he had that dream. He had that dream that Oda cut away from, and it wasn't to be King of the Pirates, otherwise he would have just shown us that. Sorry, I'm going ahead of myself, I'm getting ahead of myself, that's for the next video, but I'm just thinking now, him saying that he doesn't care about pirate rules here, it's a bit of a precursor to that. Then Sengoku the Snitch reveals to the world that Luffy's dragon son, and Garp says like, yeah, I mean, it's fine. He was notorious enough anyway. This secret being out doesn't really change too much. It just adds more fuel to the fire, pun not intended. And yeah, so the secret's out. And Luffy says to Ace, I'm going to save you even if it kills me. I don't care. And Whitebeard kind of looks at that, admires it, and says to Marco, defend this guy. Don't let him die. So Whitebeard gaining instant respect for Luffy in this way. Meanwhile, crazy, Jinbei's fighting with Moria in a really cool little quarrel. I can't believe some of these characters interacted in this way. That's one of the huge benefits of this sort of story, with these ingrained character histories just clashing in that way. It feels like legends fighting each other, these legendary historic figures in this fictional landscape nonetheless, but Moria and Jinbei, these huge figures in different ways. It's so cool to see them clash like this. And then Ace says here, there's a tragic passivity here. Seeing what everyone is going through to try to save him, he says, I don't care what the future holds for me, I accept it. I reach out to the hand that offers me help, and I accept the blade that would execute me. And he says, I won't fight anymore. He says, sorry to everyone, I know you're here for me, but I just can't stand this. And he accepts his fate here, but not really, because that is in the moment what he thinks, and it didn't hold. But it's really sad that in this moment, he accepts his life as forfeit, because of what it would cost. And if you tie in his cursed existence, his cursed blood, with that, man, do you feel bad, do you feel such sympathy for him. Garp looks so sad throughout all of this. Buggy is doing some nonsense. Buggy is some nice levity throughout a lot of this. Then Smoker and Luffy kind of interact, and Smoker confronts him, and he pins him down with this Sea Prism staff, and Boa defends Luffy. And Smoker's just going like, what the hell's going on here? Like, this poor guy, his mind must be turned upside down by what he's witnessing. And it's funny, when I mentioned Buggy's nonsense, he was talking about killing Whitebeard, like you mentioned earlier, and Whitebeard kind of just looks at him and goes, you know, why don't we just team up for now? Which is genuinely useful given the people that are in Buggy's revolution. So pretty smart. And of course, it's kind of looked at as Buggy gaining the support of this notorious, incredible legend of a man by his followers. But then Eva runs into Kuma, and immediately it's said that they have this history. And because Doflamingo says that he is dead, Kuma is dead to Eva. So it was made clear through their interactions here. Eva has this recognition. He's going, what happened to you? What is their connection is what I'm thinking, but it's clear that Kuma used to be a revolutionary. And considering the way in which he helped Luffy and his friends survive after disappearing them like that, it's just really cool, the amount of theorizing. Kuma is one of the most interesting characters in the entire story when it comes to the plot and his backstory. Why was he given, why did he become a warlord? What did he do? Why did he become pacifistas? Because at the hands of Dr. Vegapunk. He lived this life as a revolutionary, so what happened there? But Doflamingo says here that Kuma's dead. The man he used to be is gone. And so the idea that was brought forth there that I thought of in that moment was maybe him sending Luffy off in the presence of people who were, like Kizaru, who were down to kill him, or at least harm him, or something. Either way, I don't know if you guys remember, but during Sabaody, I was like, I don't know why I just sent him off like that. That's kind of weird. What was going on with their plans? I think this is clear. He was trying to save Luffy and help him gear up for this next confrontation, this next stage of his life, because he has that spirit. He was part of the revolutionaries, part of Dragon's crew. He's such an interesting character, and maybe the last shreds of his life, figments of his life, were done to save Luffy, to send him off like this. The skirmish continues. Luffy gets the keys to Ace's cuffs from Boa Hancock. Smoker tries to stop him, but she defends him more, and then we learn more about what Doflamingo's referring to here. He says that Kuma is not human anymore. He's become a weapon for the world government, and so this is where it fully substantiates the idea that he sent off Luffy with the last will of his life, the last action of his life, potentially. And now, is he actually gone? Is he still in there somewhere? We don't know the specifics about what happened, but nonetheless, Doflamingo says this to Eva and very much enjoys seeing his reaction. And you think, what's the relationship specifically between Eva and Kuma? What was it? What was the nature of it? Because they were clearly very close, going off Eva's reaction. And then Eva is nonetheless takes a different tact and is empowered and says, we gotta beat those memories into you, which I love. I love that element of it. So Crocodile is duking it out, and ultimately he comes up to Doflamingo. These two clashing, unbelievable. And Doflamingo says, it would be cool if we were on the same side, huh? And at the same time, Luffy runs into Mihawk. All these interactions, holy shit. And Mihawk says, sorry, red hair, but I can't hold back. Apologizing to Shanks about this. Really interesting. And also, not holding back is a sign of respect, I think, for Luffy, given what we know about Mihawk. And then he says, Fate, how will you deal with this heaven-sent boy? What a way to talk about Luffy there. Heaven-sent boy, given that he came down from the sky, of course, but also that cosmic luck, right? The miracles. Mihawk dwells on fate quite a bit here, so this fatalism's really interesting stuff from him. I just love having him back in the story and talking with our characters and being relevant. But he's always had interest in Luffy, so it makes sense. He's so cool. But Luffy here, again, a sign of his maturity, sees Mihawk and goes, I don't care. I just want to save Ace. So he's not down to fight him. And a nice little line is a couple of other, grunts, maybe Whitebeard pirates, I don't know exactly, go up to Mihawk and try to stop him. And he says that he doesn't remember the faces of trash to these dudes who confront him. So he's still as condescending as he was prior to meeting Zoro. That hasn't changed. It's just that he respects Zoro, he respects Luffy, but he's still low-key condescending, high-key actually. Now things rage on, and Sengoku observes the battle from the platform, and he says, you know what, let's cut off the signal, because people only need to know that we were successful. They don't need to know the full story. Again, controlling the narrative through withholding the narrative. Sengoku's really interesting. Sentomaru comes in, he's got his whole army of pacifistas now, and Mihawk, another banger of a line, kind of summarizes Luffy here. He says it's not his powers or techniques that make him special, it's his ability to gather people to help him. Like in what I've described, the force of nature way that Luffy garners people for his cause. The byproduct of his dream, his fervent desire for this dream being gathering these people. Mihawk kind of just puts it out there, and he says this is the most dangerous thing on these seas, this influence, this ability to garner support. He is the storm that gathers these people in his wake, but notably, that exact same thing can be said about what's going on with Bucky. Bucky and Luffy kind of mirror each other in that way, so I thought that was really interesting. In the midst of this, Buggy turns the signal back on and starts streaming himself to the world, which is hilarious and also super fitting that he does this, specifically in this moment. The truth is going out there, because he's antagonistic in some ways, but he's also kind of helpful. He's such an interesting character, and what he does here very much goes against what the world government want and very much benefits the overall end goal of our protagonists. And he says, I'm this legendary pirate, but they have to cut off the broadcast again, because just as Luffy garnering people in support of him is a byproduct of his dream and the type of person he is, a byproduct of Buggy's ambition is falling upward and getting the support in the same way. They have such a cool dynamic, but he streams here saying that he's this legendary pirate, but he has to fix the broadcast because his nose is bleeding. He's been in these skirmishes, so he needs to clean himself up. He's such a good character. But then, the moment, this man, Squard, part of the Whitebeard pirates, all of a sudden turns around and stabs Whitebeard in the right through the chest. Unbelievable spread. And the whiplash after the funny Buggy section, oh man, I mean, I didn't think this would be something that would kill Whitebeard, but I did think it would be, it's clear that Whitebeard, he's gonna die, but he's not gonna die like this. But nonetheless, it was so significant because of what it led to. So in response to that, there are shocked reactions everywhere, just similar to how Luffy came in, how it was really cool to see everyone's reactions. Very similar thing here. Marco and Ace are obviously heartbroken and shocked. Akainu has an interesting one. His head is kind of lowered. We can't really see much, which would kind of indicate and be a precursor to his plan a little bit. Mihawk and Aokiji both have reactions, and they are kind of non-reactions. They're interesting in that they don't really do much in response to this, which is notable. But we get the full story here. Squard stabs Whitebeard, and this is because his old crew were all killed by Goldie Roger. So he hates Goldie Roger, and as a result, learning about Ace's origin, learning that Whitebeard kept it a secret, it stirred up resentment within him. And then he kind of met with Akainu and Sengoku, both of whom told him that Whitebeard had made a deal with them under the table, so that him and his Whitebeard pirates would survive. None of the allied forces, who were not technically under his part of his crew, but some of the allied forces that would come and be associated with him that were nonetheless his children, his sons. Everyone that wasn't immediately associated under Whitebeard's flag, it was fair play to be killed, is what they told him. And so what they did specifically to sell this, very smart from both of them, really shows their sort of astuteness, their savvy. Throughout this battle, they have not been attacking Whitebeard's men, only the ones allied with him, to sell that. And so all of this together makes Squard feel that Whitebeard in this moment has done this stuff. But despite being stabbed, a fatal wound, Whitebeard hugs him, embraces him, and forgives him. Unconditional love for his son. It's unbelievable. He understands all of it. All of the manipulation and why he did this. And he says, you may be a fool, but I still love you. And he embraces him. And it's unbelievable. And Crocodile, upon seeing Whitebeard stabbed like this, he says, cut the pretense. There's no way that something like this could take you down. He says, you can't be that weak. You beat me, didn't you? And it's really cool how Sir Crocodile kind of shifts. Before, he was someone who ran from the New World. This is something that someone in my chat brought up. Now here, he is actively chasing someone who defeated him before, but feeling this emptiness as a result of his challenge being taken from under his nose. His prey, rather. This is the man who seems to have broken him, and this is really cool stuff to establish why he is the way he is in Alabasta. He doesn't hope for much, right? He's very cynical. He doesn't dream. The mediocrity of the Grand Line, right? We wondered in Alabasta why Crocodile viewed the world the way he did, and his dreams were cut short, in large part due to the challenges on the New World and the threat that Whitebeard posed to him. And I'm sure there's more to it. I'm sure there's quite a bit more to it, but nonetheless, this all helps substantiate quite a bit for Crocodile in a way that I find really effective. Specifically, Crocodile told Luffy, like, you do not know what's out there. And he was right. Moria's words echo. He was right, and he continued to be. Moria's words are some of the most haunting and true throughout this whole series. Now, Whitebeard kind of gives Sengoku and Akainu their props, said they did a good job, but in spite of this fatal wound, charges in, all guns blazing, metaphorically, in this final assault. He's literally dying, but he will, to his last breath, fight to get Ace back, fight for his cause, for his sons. And I want to talk about Squard for just a little bit. I think it's really easy to hate him for what he did. I think he's the type of character that a lot of people will hate for what he did. But it's understandable. He was impulsive, he was emotional, he didn't really think it through. He was kind of dumb through what he did, because if you really stop to think about it, the things he thought would fall apart very quickly. The moment he just stopped, took a step back, looked at it from a broader perspective, he would have known, no, Whitebeard would never do that. But people are impulsive, people are foolish, people let emotions cloud their judgment, and that's what happened here. He was fooled, he was manipulated, and he thought emotionally and made a super impulsive mistake. That is the human condition, is it not? So I really like this perspective from Squard. It's a very everyman perspective. It's a very ground level perspective. From someone who immediately regrets what he did, and nonetheless he is forgiven by Whitebeard's crew and Whitebeard himself. They all understand, so we as an audience should as well. And I think all the evidence is there for us to. And Whitebeard makes it clear to his crew, everyone who follows him, if you charge in with me, we will all die. We will probably all die. Make a choice, there's no judgment here, but if you charge with me, it's not looking good. And so many of them follow him regardless. It is epic. It is chills-inducing. I had goosebumps throughout this whole time. Whitebeard is just unbelievable. But in the midst of this, he thinks to himself, and here we have this loneliness, the loneliness of the symbol, of the legend, of the icon. He thinks, they call me the greatest, but I'm just one man with one heart. I can't live forever. And this ties into all we've been talking about. The burden he must feel. He can't live forever. And he wishes he could, because so many people depend on him. He represents so much hope for those who band around him. But he can't live forever. That's just how it is. He has to consistently live up to this ideal. How exhausting must this have been? I think if you really put yourself in his shoes and his perspective and think of this in an empathetic way, he's such a sympathetic character. Not just for what he goes through physically, but for what he's gone through psychologically for years and years. All he wanted was a family, and he loved it, and he wouldn't trade what he did for the world, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't hard, extremely difficult. There's more evidence for this loneliness angle, this living up to this idea, but it's all there. It's all there here as well. It just gets expanded upon later. The charge ensues, Whitebeard and the Whitebeard Pirates versus the Marines. All hell breaks loose. It is just chaos. Doflamingo is loving it. The illustrations are incredible. A nice little touch is that in the midst of all this, Boa's first thought is if Luffy is okay, which is very sweet and a little sad for her in this moment. In the midst of this, a Kainu sinks Whitebeard's ship. And as was said by a lot of people in my chat, that was Whitebeard's Mary. We went through the pain ourselves, end of Ennie's lobby, so we understand the pain of losing one ship in the One Piece universe. This is not just wood and boards and sails and rudders and whatever. This is a character, a living and breathing crewmate. So there's a beautifully expressive, pained, subtle expression on Whitebeard's face as he looks at the Moby Dick just falling into the water in flames. And it's so sad because we've gone through that ourselves. So lovely little touch from Oda for us to be able to empathize properly with Whitebeard in this moment. This is a horrible thing. He's dying. Ace is up for execution, and he is seeing his entire crew, everything, being torn apart in front of his eyes. It's not overwhelming, it's pretty subtle, but it tells the whole story. And he thinks, I'm sorry. Now we get a lovely little touch to the Marineford arc, is that throughout, we get the perspective of people in Sabaody watching the events happen themselves, and we get the reactions from a lot of important characters. Rayleigh is one, a lot of the Supernova characters. Here we have Bonnie, who is crying after the news of what's going on. She has some sort of connection, whether it be to Whitebeard or something going on here. But Bonnie was deeply affected by this, which I found interesting. And we see just half a panel of Law, of Trafalgar Law, heading somewhere with purpose. And I knew the moment I saw that, something's going down. He is going to do something. And it ended up being right. Oda just made that very clear, but great panel for Law. And I think just the reactions from Sabaody really nails home how much of an icon Whitebeard really is, how much he means to all these pirates. There's a moment where Jinbei sort of propels Luffy, and Luffy faces off right in front of the three admirals in order to get Ace, literally taking on all comers, the entire world to get to his brother. Now obviously he can't beat them. We know the threat that he's taking on, but nonetheless he intends to, and that says so much about him. He's always been this way. Now in the midst of this, Luffy begins to scuffle with the admirals, and the executioners begin to try to execute Ace, but right in the nick of time, well, also there's a incredible little panel where Ace seems to be accepting of this, but right in the nick of time, Crocodile comes out of nowhere and stops them. Amazing little moment. And it swings the tide a little bit. A new ship is erected for the Whitebeard pirates, and Sengoku, he tells Garp, both of them having stood by up until now, they have to join the fray. And the last spread of this chapter, which is 566, or one of the last couple of pages, is Whitebeard letting out one final battle cry. One of the most impactful little panels in the entire arc, maybe the most. It's incredible. Happens right before this spread, where Whitebeard is looking down. He's kind of just looking down. You can't really see his eyes. He's downcast. He takes his moment of solitude and weakness and vulnerability, and he inhales, and then he exhales, and he lets out this battle cry, and he becomes the Whitebeard we know again, the symbol, the man who is this legend, this icon, this incredible spearhead. But in that one moment of solitude where he looks down, that is him collecting himself. That is the lonely Whitebeard getting ready for one final push. The solitude of Whitebeard in that moment as he gathers himself for this hell, this moment of solitude and vulnerability. It's incredible stuff. The little glances, the loneliness, the little looks, the grief. This is all the burden of being Whitebeard. We've seen the burden of being a captain for Luffy. This is it to a whole new degree. He's a lonely character. He takes this 1 minute to collect himself, and then he becomes the symbol again. Who knows how confident he really is in terms of certain things, you know? He's self-assured of his combat. I think that's clear. In combat, he's been completely confident, especially in the earlier parts of Marineford. But who's to say how he feels about certain things? Who has he been able to confide in? Hopefully Marco, to an extent. Because, God, the amount of vulnerability he hasn't been able to show, it could destroy a person. So I hope, to some extent, he's been able to share that burden with someone, Marco, but what I love about this is we see this loneliness, we see this burden, and later in the arc, Luffy is able to be his saving grace. We'll get to that. There are skirmishes everywhere, Aokiji, Akainu, Whitebeard, but the most important thing for me here is Garp. Marco starts going towards Ace, and then I believe Garp stops him. Sorry, this is chaos. I could be getting some small details wrong. Please bear with me. But Garp stops him here. And here, what he is doing is defending the execution of who is essentially his grandson in service of this entity that is the world government, who has shown to be corrupt in a bunch of ways prior to this. So, from a certain perspective, it could be hard to see where he's coming from. And it took me a little bit to really properly not understand, but feel Garp's dilemma here, and his pain, and why he chooses to side with the world government. And I think it actually, I had to look back at this retroactively after seeing what Blackbeard did later on, which we'll get to. But what's important is that Garp is one of the faces and most important people in the Marines, in the world, this subset of the world government. While our exposure to Luffy is lovely, and our exposure to pirates as a result, and our association with pirates is lovely, there are bad pirates all over the place. We see them throughout the Grand Line, we see them all over the place, and they can wreak total havoc, like Blackbeard. Potential world-ending havoc, what he wants to do. Or what he has done. Just completely heinous stuff. And the fact of the world is there are so many bad pirates in the world, so an entity like the world government, and as a result the Marines, is needed. A lot of what Garp is doing here is thinking of the bigger picture. If he helps Ace to be saved, what does that say about the Marines? It implodes in on itself. It's complete chaos. And the one unified body that is the safeguard of the world's most notorious, chaotic, evil pirates is essentially dematerialized. And we know how important reputation is to create a veneer of power. Spandam told us about that ages ago. So Garp knows that him defecting, essentially, it would weaken the Marines, as a result embolden the pirates, and as a result, lead to widespread panic and fear and probably horrible things to the populace of the world. And once again, this is kind of that theme, I guess. This is what Ranger, one of my mods, said. He is a symbol. For better or for worse, Garp is a symbol, and his actions are very keenly observed by all those involved, all those around the world, to tell a tale about the state of the world. His actions hold immense weight. He is a symbol. The man is a loving grandfather. The symbol impacts the world. And there is a burden there, and there's a connection between the man and the symbol there that he finds extremely difficult to come to grips with. And when it comes down to it, if he saves Ace, he sides with Whitebeard, an emperor. That completely destroys the Marines reputationally. The world devolves into chaos, widespread death, widespread bloodshed, a new era of pain and conflict. And he weighs that horrible world that could potentially result from this against the life of Ace. And ultimately, he makes his choice there. And it's so difficult. This conflict substantiates him so much. I can't help but feel immense sympathy for his position. Would I do what he did? I don't know. It's such a tough thing. There's no real right answer. By saving Ace, Garp would condemn tons of others. Countless. So it's something we can't really put ourselves in the perspective of. And it's just so difficult. And I think that's really sold through both the internal and external thoughts of Garp, his expressions, all the things he says. It helps elevate him so much. This arc does so much good for Garp. He's this embodiment of tough but genuine love, and he respected Roger to have Ace remain hidden. He's proud of Luffy. There's this duality of family and duty, and the weight of that duty. And I just keep going back to that line of his, if only Ace and Luffy had joined the Navy, not the pirates, it would be so much easier. But that isn't how life turns out sometimes. When they oppose the world, they put the world at risk. Now, compounding on this, Whitebeard gets some sort of a heart attack in the middle of this whole thing, and Marco is absolutely shocked, and we see him monologuing internally. This is what I had feared the most would happen. This is coming to pass. Akainu says not even you can escape old age. And Ace thinks back to his life and what Whitebeard's done for him, and now what's going on for him. And in reflection, in contrast to how he felt earlier, that passivity, I give up, take me, that sort of thing. Here, in spite of his acceptance and his passivity, he decides, in spite of it all, everyone's suffering for him, what overtakes him here is this insane desire to live for this cause, to protect those close to him, to repay those who are sacrificing themselves for him. He wants to live. Reminds me a lot of Robin. In spite of all this, please save me. That is what he's saying, and it's so empowering in a way. Really empowering, but really sad as well. But I love that he comes to this conclusion, because that's what they're all here for. That's what he deserves. His life was seemingly cursed from the start, but he deserves to live, regardless of what he was born into, regardless of his blood. And he accepts it here, by saying, please save me, yes, I want to live. Now, in the midst of this, Luffy keeps getting pumped with these hormones that make him okay to battle. I don't know. I'm keeping an eye on that, but it's probably not good to continuously push yourself like that. Probably not great. And then thinking back about Whitebeard and his heart attack, he has had to keep up this facade of being healthy, being strong for his sons, to be this symbol. But again, this loneliness is shown when he gets struck by this heart attack, and yet still perseveres in spite of it all. He told Ace all the way back when, you're gonna have to live and find out for yourself whether your life is worth living, whether you deserve to live, all that sort of thing. He has changed so many lives, and he is worth so much to all these people, all of his sons. And it just really strikes me, I believe someone in my chat said this as well, that what strikes Marco is not his enemy in this moment when he sees this happening, not fighting, not the state of the world, not the world government, not politics, not Ace, even. What he feared most has come to pass, and that is Father Time creeping up on Whitebeard. It's so horrifically, devilishly effective. And just going back to Ace's flashback once again, he thinks to himself, do I deserve to live? All that stuff. And in response to this, Whitebeard just doesn't care. And he says, we're all children of the sea. It doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is who you are. God, that really elevates so much to do with their relationship. After Luffy is pumped full of these hormones or whatever, he re-enters the battle, and who stands up to him but Kobe? Kobe, terrified to stand up to this person who really is his friend, but they're on opposite sides, and yet Luffy, I think, would respect that he stood up for his ideals. They're on opposite sides of this, and he is courageous enough, he is brave enough to, despite his fear, face up against someone way stronger than him, which I think geared him up for what he would do later. Luffy destroys him, he makes short work of him, but nonetheless, a little bit of an Usopp-esque moment, dare I say, for Kobe. He's extremely brave here, and he stands up for what he wants to do. Now, again, lots of hesitancy, understanding the context of what Luffy's really doing here, just trying to save his brother. I'm sure it was done with a heavy heart, but at the end of the day, I do think Luffy, if he were to reflect on this, would have respected that. And what Kobe says is, I need to fight to change myself. That is very striking. And after this, Whitebeard is just impaled, attacked by so many Marines. Just this man mountain impaled all over the place. He's got like wounds head to toe, and still he goes on. He moves forward. Pardon the Attack on Titan reference. And he keeps holding on. He somehow keeps holding on, saying, I just gotta hold on a little bit longer because I know what would happen were I to die. A symbol dying like that, in this sort of manner, no good. Like, it needs to be, he needs to even kind of plan out the method and manner in which he dies because of what it'll the knock-on effect it'll have on those before or after him. It's incredible, the burden on this man. But it's all kind of heating up, and it looks like Ace is very close to being executed, and then Luffy just screams and lets out this haki. I believe it's called Hockey of the King or something like that, but the most common term for it is Conqueror's Hockey, and everyone looks at him in shock. And Whitebeard looks at him being able to have used this, and looks a little encouraged. This is a ray of hope for him. He looks at Luffy, and he looks at him as this glimmer of hope. Maybe there is a future out there. Maybe there is some solace for me after I'm gone. Maybe there is hope for the future. Maybe there is someone that can be this spearhead going forward. Maybe it's his era after me. And so Luffy gives him this solace after him seeing this, in a way. And I'm really happy for that for Whitebeard in particular, before some horrible stuff happened, of course. But there's widespread shock, all sorts of people reacting to this. Many are shocked. Garp seems to have some recognition. He goes like, so you had it from birth. Ace is really shocked. Mihawk just has a ... Akainu and Kizaru, they're all just kind of watching. But for this Conqueror's Hockey, Eva kind of goes, hey, dragon, looks like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Genetics? But after this, Whitebeard orders all his men to back Luffy up. Again, kind of substantiating the idea, this kid could be our hope. And Luffy makes his way over, keeps going. But then, who stops him? Garp. His grandfather steps in and stops him and says, you're gonna have to get through me if you want to get to your brother. And Garp, in this difficult situation, for so many reasons we've already talked about, says that he's been fighting pirates for decades, so Luffy's gonna have to be at his best to take him on. And he says that he and Ace, this is the path they've chosen. And Luffy says that he doesn't want to fight him. He won't fight him. But Garp says, you know, in life, there are a lot of times where you have to do something you don't want to do, and that he's an enemy of the state. And with regards to the first part of that is a hell of a line, because one, he's kind of guiding Luffy through this. It's a bit of advice for someone in Luffy's position. Someone in Luffy's position who takes on the government consistently, who is increasingly getting more and more into these moral quandaries, and complicated issues. He is increasingly going to have to do things that he doesn't want to do. So that is just sound advice, not just later in the horizon, but it's also advice for him in this literal moment. I think he's challenging Luffy, and I think a small part of him wants Luffy to succeed and save Ace in his deepest heart of hearts. But also, he's speaking from experience, doing things that he doesn't want to do. He's fighting Luffy, defending the world government and stopping Ace's execution from being curtailed. And he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to fight Luffy. He doesn't want to prevent Ace's rescue. And that's something that in life he doesn't want to do, but he has to do for the bigger picture. So there's so many layers from both Garp's side and for the advice he's giving to Luffy. What a fantastic character. He's teaching him through adversity here and also speaking from experience. It's a sort of a look into his soul, into his heart, while also guiding Luffy. Similar to Vivi, Jinbei, Iceberg, a bit of wisdom. And Luffy knows this already. He's had to do plenty of things that he doesn't want to do. The going merry, the fight with Usopp, just to name a couple. He knows this, but it's a welcome reminder. And Garp thinks back to their childhood, and he thinks back to Ace not wanting to die. He heard him there, and he kind of closes his eyes, and in one of the best spreads in the entire arc, Luffy punches him. And in this moment, I actually think he held back. I think he actually lets Luffy punch him. It's just my gut feeling. I have no real evidence for it, outside of what I've said already about his connection to Luffy and Ace. But I don't know, I just get that feeling. I mean, Garp is stronger than Luffy. Again, not to power scale, but Garp is a stronger fighter than Luffy. And Luffy lands that on him. I don't know, I think he let him. Sengoku transforms into this Buddha-like figure, using his devil fruit powers. And Luffy, on the platform, is helped by Mr. 3 to help save Ace. And a random peak Mr. 3 moment out of nowhere, he says, if I was here to avenge my fallen comrade, would you laugh at me? It's such a tiny little moment, but it says so much about him and his connection to Mr. 2. He's doing this to avenge Mr. 2. There's no build-up, it's just dropped, and it's so organic, and it hits like a truck, and it made me tear up. For Mr. 3, it's crazy, and I love the spontaneity of it. It's just in this amalgamation of emotions and drama and tension and fighting. it just plops in there, and it hits you like a ton of bricks. I do have to say, I watched the anime episode for this. It was far less effective in the anime. There's this whole build-up, this huge build-up for the dynamic between Mr. 3 and Mr. 2. It's very slow and gradual. I prefer what Oda just did. Just toss it in there. Give us tons of substance with just a tiny little line. But he helps him by making a key out of wax, and the last spread of the chapter, Luffy saves Ace, and they're surrounded by flames, taking on all comers, so empowering, so triumphant, and they make their escape. They start, just as when they were kids, taking on, like I said, taking on everyone. But there's a line sprinkled in here that immediately made me worry, which was, Luffy saying, "One day I'll be able to surpass you, Ace. One day I'll be able to surpass you." That is just crying out and begging for the person who is supposed to be surpassed one day to die and never properly be surpassed. The moment Luffy said that, I started putting my head in my hands. I started getting nervous, anxious, palms a little sweaty. This isn't going to end well. The moment Luffy said that, that was a huge death flag for Ace. And it's super thrilling, it's super empowering, the tone shifts, but that line, Oda knew what he was doing with that line. And from then on, it was just racking anxiety. But they're fighting their way through the Marine soldiers, and it's all going really well, and there's some great spreads, some great banter between the two. It's just too bad it's mired by this anxiety. Squard, having gone back to his family, is leading a charge as well, but Whitebeard stops their charge, and he says, "Everyone here must return to the New World alive. As long as you live, things are okay." And what's changed? Luffy's used his Conqueror's Haki since Whitebeard just said, "You guys could all die going into this charge." I mean, Luffy's changed his entire complexion, his entire outlook. But he says this, and he says, "These are my final orders as captain." And as everyone looks on, he says, "I'm gonna settle matters here with the Marines." So inspirational, so larger than life. And someone asks, I don't remember who, maybe the Marines, if he plans to die here, and he says, "I am a relic of a bygone era. I am the last remnants of the past era." Very interesting. There's a sort of Logtown-esque passing of the torch element to Marineford in a couple ways. This new era. Interesting dwellings on legacy, on Roger, Rayleigh being the last remnant, Luffy being perhaps ushering in this new era, like he did in Logtown, but properly here, despite how it ends for him. Jozu loses his arm. This is the start of the meme, because all this shit is happening on stream as I'm reading through it. Whitebeard is on his last legs. He is being the amazing character that he is. I'm worried about Ace. They're fighting through. There's fire. There's chaos. Akainu, Aokiji, Garp. I'm thinking about Kobe and, Mihawk. What are the Emperors doing? The Warlords? What's going on? I don't know. And then someone in chat says, AJ, you missed something. And I said, oh yeah, I know Jozu lost his arm. I'm really sorry, but I just don't give a shit about Jozu right now. I'm sorry, Joe. I just didn't care. In this moment, I was worried about so many other things. So, RIP Jozu's arm, but, I mean, it gave birth to a great meme. Maybe I'll splice it in here. If you're one of the successors to the Will of D, show me what kind of era you will create. Oh my god. This is incredible. He's understanding what Shanks told him. He gave up his arm for the sake of a new era, just like Jozu. But anyways, here is where what I was talking about earlier occurs. Akainu being very astute, intelligent, clever, manipulative, he starts attacking Whitebeard's honor and pride, calling him a loser, saying that he is just a disgrace, which upsets Ace. Like I said before, Ace has always been this way for the reasons we discussed previously. It's in character, it makes sense, it's tragic as all hell, but this is who he is, so why wouldn't he act this way? And Akainu's just so smart, so devilishly smart. It attacks Whitebeard's pride in the most personal, powerful way. Whitebeard's pride from the perspective of Ace, because I'm sure Whitebeard really couldn't care less, but Ace does. And it's so inevitable. The moment he does that, the moment Ace turns around, you just know he's dead. But the question is how. And Luffy falls down in this whole situation, which is a result of his fatigue, a result of pushing himself too far. And again, maybe a little bit of a lesson to learn, because after this, Akainu goes for him. And it's not Ace fighting Akainu straight on that causes Ace to die, but it's Ace protecting his brother, who was targeted by Akainu. And Luffy is broken by this, feeling the culpability, and this moment, it's a hallmark moment in One Piece, and I think it kind of speaks for itself. I don't have a ton to say. We see this flashback of Ace, his life, his cursed life, but how it gradually morphed into this beautiful life of belonging and purpose and identity through his loved ones. And he mentions two people, Dadan and Sabo, and he says to Luffy that I would have given up after them, after what happened with them, if I didn't have someone to care for, to look after, that being Luffy. Jinbei in the midst of this, Marco too, are ready to sacrifice themselves to save Luffy and Ace, but he's going. And in this gutting scene, just the lasting impact of Garp as a character. He's overcome by rage and grief, seeing what's happened to Ace. And Sengoku's pressing him down into the ground, stopping him. And he says, you better keep doing this to me. You better keep holding me down, because if you don't, I will kill him. I will destroy him. I will tear him limb from limb. He says, I will kill Sakazuki, Akainu. And it reminds me instantly of Luffy and Baratie not interfering, crying, but not interfering with Zoro's fight, even if it was to the death. Another Luffy parallel. But Ace in this moment, he knows he's dying. He knows he's a goner. And he says that he regrets that he wasn't able to see Luffy fulfill his dream, even if he was kind of fighting against it a little bit. But he knows he can do it. He knows he can do it. And he says, while his life was cursed, it was one worth living. And he dies saying to his crew, to Whitebeard, to Luffy, thank you for loving me. And Luffy screams. He breaks. He's fragmented. He's despondent. This destroys him. And from this point on, he's broken. He's a non-factor in Marineford. All that he stood for, all the hope, it comes crashing down as his brother, a huge part of his life, dies. And I've read post-war at this point, or at least most of it, so I know what Ace is talking about with Sabo and Dadan. And because of post-war, if I just spoil a tiny bit of it, how crazy is it knowing what Luffy's gone through, and knowing how he didn't want to lose anyone, and knowing what Ace meant to him. Sabaody, this moment, it all hits that much more. And Luffy said, you told me that you'd never die, which is what he told him when he was a kid. But he succumbs. And something that Trish, from my chat, one of my mods says, is that there's something tragic about the narration calling Ace Roger's son at the end here, and not Whitebeard's, while Ace is trying to fight the destiny the whole time, but in death couldn't even escape it. He was trapped in that way. He was freed in others, but in the history books, he couldn't really escape it, and he died because of it. So there's a tragedy there. His life, the last few years of his life were years of freedom, and that's beautiful, but his death was because he was defined by his blood when he wanted to escape it the whole time. And that is so tragic. And again, the narration, right? That bias, that integration of that. But again, Luffy in the aftermath of this is despondent. He can't function. Eva and Jinbei get him out of there, but he's unresponsive completely. Now, Akainu's trying to eliminate Luffy, but he's being defended by Marco, Jinbei, Buggy in the midst of this, despite being scared beyond his wits, despite trying to run away, despite claiming to be selfish, actually helps Jinbei and Luffy here. Jinbei takes this gigantic hit. He ends up being okay, but he's 100% willing to die for Luffy here, and Buggy helps them get out. It's chaos, though. Doflamingo is just reveling in it once more, and Whitebeard sees his son die before he does, when he's in the midst of dying, and he just loses it, completely loses it, goes off, enraged. He just completely goes off on the Marines, just taking everything, using everything he has. He starts this huge fissure. It splits the island, and Akainu goes after him, and he quite literally cuts off, burns off almost half of Whitebeard's face his face is cleaved in two, and he keeps going. I can't believe this man. I can't properly articulate how amazing I find him. It's just incredible. And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, Blackbeard arrives, just in time, as he says, to see his old captain die. But here his plan is laid out. This chaos factor. This man, like I said, this is where I really properly bought into him, and a lot of it has to do with his role here. Sorry, I'm going to talk about this a little bit out of order, but I really want to get to this right now, because what he does here is substantiate the moral dilemma of people like Garp and Sengoku and Hannibal even in Impel Down, because his existence here is the biggest proof. There's other proof, there's other bits of substance, of course, but this is what really substantiated and properly contextualized in my mind the moral quandary and why the world's government is, while very corrupt, very wrong in a lot of ways, still nonetheless a dark shade of gray. They're not black and white, and they're necessary and they're needed. And they were beforehand, but that gray was lightened a little bit more here, because Blackbeard, after Whitebeard's death, again, sorry, skipping ahead a little bit, shows the true calamitous evil and darkness that can spring from a pirate with no regard for holding back or order or anything. This is a man who will destroy the very world itself, and this is a man who an entity like the world's government is a safeguard against. Blackbeard here plays that role. He substantiates Sengoku. He substantiates Garp. He shows why the world's government is necessary. And we could have put two and two together, like I've said before, and there are also examples of that before, of other pirates that are very bad for the world at large. But this is the best example of it so far, and I love that it's here, and I love that Blackbeard's here, and I love that he also represents this contrast to Luffy. Like I said in the Impel Down video, he needs the One Piece to exist a little bit. It seems like he does. But he is also just this bastardization. He takes Whitebeard's power and he uses it in a way that's totally a betrayal of who the man was. He takes the pirate spirit and the yearning for freedom, but he uses it in a way that is totally against what Luffy and co stand for. They're similar in lots of ways, but they diverge in all the ways that makes him a bastardization, a disgrace, a fraud. He is not him. He's a coward. But he's perfect because of that. But he's also extremely smart, because his plan was to be on Whitebeard's crew, waiting for the day when the darkness fruit makes its way there. This is laid out to me by someone, so thank you. Once it made its way there, he killed Thatch. After that, he captures Ace, becomes a warlord because of the esteem that capturing Ace will get him, all in service to get Whitebeard's Quake Fruit after freeing all these people from Impel Down. Sorry, I didn't mention that. He frees all these people from level 6 of Impel Down. They become part of his crew, and he garners all of this to get the Quake Fruit and take the world by storm himself. Unbelievable planning, unbelievable patience, mad respect for all of that. And then he's so rich thematically. And then another cool thing is that he and Luffy kind of complete each other's journeys. They're kind of intertwined in that way, because Luffy is the reason, the spearhead for the Impel Down breakout, which allowed him to garner that support. Shiryu wouldn't have joined him. Blackbeard would have died from Magellan's poisoning. And we mentioned earlier how Luffy and co had mysteriously gotten through the gates. Blackbeard did that through Lafitte's hypnotism. So they helped each other unintentionally. They are destined. They are fated. And it makes sense given how diverging they are. But this is Whitebeard's chapter, 576. Blackbeard and his crew, they all gang up on this guy with half a face, with his body covered in stab wounds and cannon wounds and everything. But he faces them in this spread, taking it all on, this legend. And we see a flashback of Whitebeard talking with Roger, who mentions Raftel, which we haven't heard about in a long time. Really cool to hear that come back. But he mentions Raftel, and Whitebeard wasn't interested in any of that. He wasn't really interested in going to Raftel. And the flashback cuts off with Roger telling Whitebeard what the D means, Oda teasing us as we expect he would. But here, Whitebeard exclaims to him that Blackbeard is not the guy to carry on Roger's legacy. He knew Roger, and he is not him. Blackbeard is not him. He's not the successor. He is, again, like I said, the bastardization. He's similar to Luffy in some ways, but different in all the ways that matter. And as Whitebeard speaks, he talks about the one who will bring this hope. He believes in Luffy as he's being carried off by Jinbei. As his speech overlays, we see Luffy being carried off, again despondent, unconscious, broken. But nonetheless, Whitebeard believes that he will move past this someday. He will be triumphant. He will learn from this, he will ingrain it, and Whitebeard has seen enough to hope in this boy to lead to this prosperous new era. Whitebeard sees this in Luffy. He believes in him. He says Luffy will rise up. He is the hope. He says someone will find the treasure, the One Piece, and they will turn the world upside down, but it will not be Blackbeard. And he says because the One Piece exists. The One Piece is real. One of the best lines in the series, because one, a lovely little detail here is that Luffy is unconscious. He does not hear it. And Luffy is someone who didn't want to know one way or another whether the One Piece was real, because it would make the whole adventure futile. He strives for it, not knowing whether it exists or not, because the journey towards it is in and of itself what grants him this spirit, this freedom, this adventure. It is the ends and the means, but it is futile. It feels empty if he knows one way or another what he's going for. The unknown of it, the unknown aspect of it, the Schrodinger's cat, if you will, of it, is why he loves it, is why he strives for it. And notably, Whitebeard does this to bring forth, again, kind of in the way Roger did, this new era. Sengoku is desperately upset that Roger does this. He makes immense trouble for all the Marines by declaring this, Whitebeard, and he weakens them with his last breaths. What a line. What a beautiful line. The One Piece really does exist, which actually is good news for Blackbeard, but it feels like a defiance against him for all the reasons we stated beforehand. Genius line. And in the midst of this, his whole crew, Marco, everyone's crying out for him. It's so sad. And we see this flashback, and we see that this man, who is quite literally the strongest character in One Piece, he doesn't care about strength or treasure or conquest even. All he wanted all this time since he was young was a family, and that's what he had. And while his life was full of this burden, he would have done it 1,000,000 times over if it meant protecting that treasure of his. It says a lot about Whitebeard. The biggest, I would say one of the biggest, if not the biggest leader in the story up till now, is one of the most heartfelt characters. What is One Piece consistently said about leaders? The most effective ones, the ones that should be in power, should have that leadership, are the ones who are heartfelt. And Whitebeard says, "I owe you everything, my sons. Farewell." And the narration, as we see the sun refracting off of this magnificent, beautiful character, eyes forward, facing the enemy, even in death. Even with half his face gone, he would never fall. He will forever be remembered as a monster for the way he destroyed his enemies that day. In this one battle alone, he suffered 267 sword wounds, was struck by 152 bullets and 46 cannon blasts, and yet neither that mighty body nor his pirate's pride suffered even one coward's wound. He never once showed his back to them, consistently protecting all those behind him. The legend that is Whitebeard, one of the very best characters in the story, an unbelievable man. And there are just a couple little notes about Whitebeard. One thing I really like about him that was pointed out to me is that even if he has his values for his crew and he advises them and whatever, once they make decisions, he respects them. He treats them like adults. He doesn't infantilize them. He did it with Ace. He did it with Squard, even, to an extent. So there's that amount of respect there. And he antithesis the world government because they have such a fixation on bloodlines, right? They had to kill Ace because he was the son of Goldie Roger, and being his heir meant that he could rise up as this new figurehead to oppose them. They valued that, and they had to destroy that as a result. They didn't really care who he was, they cared what he was born into, who he was associated with in a familial way. And they're after Luffy because he's the son of Dragon. But Whitebeard doesn't give a shit about any of that. They're all children of the sea. Anyone can go under his banner and he will protect them to the end. He doesn't care about blood at all. He's the true antithesis to the world government in so many ways. And there's this narration in the chapter after this of the world's reacting to Whitebeard's death. Rayleigh's in Sabaody watching, and he sort of pours a drink for Whitebeard. Rayleigh being maybe the last remnant of this old guard. Well, not really, but One of the few. They're dwindling. And like I said, Blackbeard, this bastardization, steals the power from Whitebeard's body. Meanwhile, like I said, Buggy stays kind of true and kind of endearing in the way he helps Luffy, and everyone else helps Luffy to get away from Akainu. And throughout all of this, Jinbei remembers Ace asking, please look after my brother. Look after my younger brother. And Jinbei said there that he can't promise that because he only dedicates himself to people he truly believes in. But right here, after seeing what he's seen, he decides that Luffy is worth it, and he would sacrifice himself, put himself on the line for Luffy. He says that he will look after him. So after this, it's clear to me that Jinbei is going to be a key factor in the story going forward, and I'm delighted by that. I really, really like Jinbei. But yeah, Blackbeard, sorry I'm jumping back and forth a little bit. It's kind of chaotic in my mind, but yeah, Blackbeard gets that fruit, and he gets that power, and he now has 2 devil fruit powers, which is, I think, unheard of so far. Incredibly unique. He's a coward, a sham, and a disgrace, but you gotta give it to him. He's done something that no one thought was really possible. And he says that it's now his era. And again, love what he stands for in this calamity, in this travesty. He uses this fruit in a way that causes just like the earth seems to be shattering. The waves travel all the way to Sabaody when Blackbeard uses it, which is interesting because you compare it to Whitebeard. Whitebeard uses powers, but he controlled it. It didn't go to Sabaody. He used it with much more skill, much more authority, whereas Blackbeard's just going wild with it. Nice little contrast between those two. And another cool contrast is between Akainu and Blackbeard, because Akainu would go against anyone who would dare question the idea of what his justice is, or the world government's justice is. Morally, he finds it reprehensible. He has to defeat injustice, but that injustice is set out by the world government. But never mind, I've gone on about that a lot. But that's Akainu. Blackbeard completely disrupts that order. He is the exact opposite. He is total freedom, but to the point of anarchy and chaos and destruction and darkness. And it was posed to me that there are 2 opposite sides of the spectrum, with Luffy being kind of a balance in between. I have to let that cook a little bit for myself personally, but it's a really interesting thought. And Jinbei's trying to escape to reach the sea, and Sir Crocodile comes in and helps them in an amazing little moment, fighting off Akainu to let them escape. I think now here he's realized the us versus them element of this. This has helped him contextualize what Luffy really is, who Luffy's really aligned with, that this infighting will not really be productive, and he kind of defends the pirate spirit here. I think through this he understands who Luffy is, and respects that. In Alabasta, he asked Luffy, why would you fight for someone else? Why would you put your life on the line for them? Why would you protect them? He has seen here why Luffy protects the people he cares for, and I think something clicked for him here. And Luffy, after going down in the way he does, all his friends from Impel Down, the connections he makes, Croc, Jinbei, Eva, Buggy, all these connections he makes, Mr. 1, Mr. 3 helps, all these people, these connections he makes, the primary theme of Impel Down, I think, comes back to save him here, even with him unconscious. But it's a really great moment for Crocodile, and it makes me wonder, with Whitebeard gone, what does he do? What is his goal going forward? Will he change his overall attitude? Will he continue to be as cynical as he is? Will his goals change? Will he be aimless? I don't know. And then right at the end, Trafalgar Law, who left that one chapter with purpose, comes in and saves them. And says he's a doctor. He can take this. He'll save Luffy. But as all this is happening, Marineford, the battle still rages on. But despite the Whitebeard pirates having quote-unquote lost, Whitebeard's dead, Ace is dead, they're retreating, the Marines are still killing people en masse, and Kobe in this moment says that he can hear the voices being cancelled out one by one, extremely similar to Isa from Skypiea, having heard that, almost exactly the same, and he can't take it, this loss of life. He feels that life is sacred, there is a sanctity with life, and he can't stomach that this body, this system that he works for or works under, he can't stand to represent a system, a body, a faction that is this heinous, that will kill people en masse even when the battle's done. He's devastated at this loss of life, and so as we talked about before, he confronts Akainu, knowing he will die, but standing for his ideals here. And since the very beginning, what has One Piece been about? One of the primary themes? Ideals over life. Zoro was willing to die all the way back in Baratie for his ideals, even if his physical life would have been taken. Oda said in that SBS ages ago that the physical life was not nearly as important as the ideals here. Kobe is representing that. He is embodying the spirit of a Straw Hat here, just from an antagonistic point of view. But nonetheless, he's embodying the Straw Hat spirit here. Heart over reason. Ideals over life. And he faces Akainu willing to die just for his ideals, just for standing for something. But it matters, like I said. This little bit, it doesn't make Akainu change his mind, obviously. It doesn't shift the tides of war, but it delays it just enough for someone who can shift the tides of war to come in. Shanks. One of my favorite spreads in the entire arc is when he comes in and blocks Akainu's attack. He arrives with his crew to end this war. He has come to end it. I lost my shit at this. I was so hyped at this. You guys know me. I love Shanks, but he appears very rarely, and in this moment, so much was going on, I wasn't thinking of Shanks at all. But he comes here, he saves the day, he ends the war. Let me splice in that clip of me seeing Shanks. It was an all-time moment.
What? Share? What?
And he thanks Kobe for his courage, for saving, for allowing those few seconds to accumulate for him to come in there. He thanks Kobe, and it's really poetic. He's the man who inspired Luffy to go out and search for these dreams and on his conquest and his adventure and his journey. And Kobe's the first one Luffy ever inspired. There's a beautiful poetry to that. And the reason that Kobe is able to even do that in the first place, to have this courage in the first place, is because Luffy taught him how to live. Shanks, through embodying this and passing this on to Luffy, and of course, Luffy owns this himself. I'm not saying this is all Shanks, but there's a poetic passing of the torch here. Shanks to Luffy, Luffy to Kobe. Kobe shows the courage that Luffy taught him, and it comes back and Shanks is able to take up the torch again and stop this war. It's beautiful. And another little detail is that the world hears Whitebeard's proclamation that the One Piece is real. And they wouldn't have been able to do that if Buggy didn't take the time to keep broadcasting it. Kobe's little act there, the few seconds. Whitebeard stands, Luffy going in to save Ace, his hockey, Ace in general, all these little acts of courage, of kindness, of togetherness, of connection. They may have felt futile, they may have ended in loss and heartbreak, but in the end, they added up to something, and that was Shanks coming in, saving the day, preventing further loss of life, and allowing those who could go on to live and fight another day. That's one of my favorite thematic ideas throughout all of One Piece. It's genius, and it's so emotional, and it's so beautiful. And it's also said, by the way, Shanks has been a little busy. Yesterday, a day before, Shanks fought one of the other emperors, the other four emperors, Kaido from Wano yesterday, the day before he comes to stop this literal war. He's been busy, but one of my favorite moments, and a moment that got me very choked up, was someone asked him, "Aren't you going to see Luffy?" But he says no. Luffy promised that he'd give Shanks' hat back when he was a proper pirate. But Luffy here is broken and devastated, and he's fallen down. He isn't a proper pirate in this moment. He's seen the scale he has to meet, and he's nowhere near it, and he's defeated. And so, to see Luffy now, when he is defeated and not a proper pirate, would violate that promise. It's that bond between those two. It's that trust. Whitebeard represented the ideal of what Luffy is striving to be. Maybe one day. A proper pirate. Maybe he won't be as strong as Whitebeard, but that is a proper pirate. Shanks is a proper pirate. Luffy just isn't up to that level yet, so he can't see Shanks just yet. As much as Shanks would love to see him, because he cares for him, because he would want to support him through this, Luffy would be devastated to be seen in this way, and Shanks knows that because they're cut from the same cloth, and so in this unspoken agreement, he cannot see Luffy like this. But the key here is he can't see him yet. That is the implication. Because he believes in Luffy more than almost anyone in the world. He knows he will bounce back from this. Just like Whitebeard said he would, Shanks knows he will as well. He believes in him. Just like he sacrificed his arm for the sake of a new era for Luffy when he was a child. He believed in him that much. So too does he believe that he will bounce back from this. And so, it's not that he won't see him ever. It's that, not today. Because this is a stumble. This is a huge setback. He is broken today, but he will dust himself off eventually. He will gather himself. And he will work his way through this and become stronger for it. And Shanks knows he will. He believes in him. And that trust there, it moves me so much. Shanks is an incredible character. Absolutely incredible. I don't care how rarely he shows up. When he does, he embodies all that One Piece is in every possible way. Luffy wouldn't have wanted this any other way, and he knows that. He understands him. And they will meet. It's one of the best moments in the story, without a doubt. And there's some fun throughout. There's some nice Buggy and Shanks interactions as they meet again. They're funny, they're cute, they're endearing. Marco and Shanks share a nice moment, a nice dynamic between two veterans. And then Mihawk walks away, not wanting to fight Shanks. Interesting. Bit of a rivalry there. Mihawk walking away, running away with his tail between his legs. I'm kidding. I know there's power scaling debates between Mihawk and Shanks. I'm just joking. I have no side in this fight. And Shanks just declares, any more fighting will lead to unnecessary loss, but we will fight you if you want to. And everyone withdraws. And Shanks says, he tops it all off to say that they'll see to the burials of Whitebeard and Ace. And he says to the world government, Sengoku, that he will not have them making a mockery, a spectacle of their deaths. They've already done enough. And that in itself is a bit of a blow because they love shaping the narrative, but Sengoku agrees begrudgingly. And just like that, the war is done. Craved into the tablets of history, this monumental battle was ended by red-haired Shanks. And there it ends. Unbelievable. Beyond words. Oda's best work in terms of writing, in terms of presentation. What he did in one arc with Whitebeard, incredible. Absolutely incredible. How he elevated Garp. How he elevated Shanks through this minimalistic stuff. Great Jinbei stuff, great Crocodile stuff, Kobe, Ace, Doflamingo. It's just, how on earth did Oda do this? This is an arc, like I said, that could only really have been done in One Piece, with these gradual building blocks coming to fruition when all hell broke loose. It's one of a kind. There's nothing like it I've ever experienced in stories. It is the first, I've talked about One Piece arcs, and, that one's a 9, that one's a light 9, that one's a strong 9, this one's the strongest 9. But without saying, this arc is a 9.5, or an actual strong 9 close to a 10. I will say that about Marineford. This is a strong 9, close to a 10, it's a 9.5, which is the only arc so far that I would give that score. This was just incredible. If I were to say I have one complaint, it's a very minor one, but I would say that Smoker is actually underused. I would have liked his perspective to have been dwelt upon more. He's such an important figure, a go-between, a gray area, a good person, I truly believe, part of a very dark entity. And I think his perspective at seeing all of this would have been very valuable, and we saw bits, but I would have liked more. I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity, so that's my only real problem with the arc. But everything else, unbelievable. Akainu, established so strongly in this arc. Sengoku, lots of really interesting stuff. Blackbeard elevated too. Incredible. It's just beyond words, and I've spoken for quite a while, but somehow I still feel like it's beyond words. This arc says so much about how the world can be changed. Evil, corrupt regimes can be changed through little acts of courage, of bravery, of standing up for what you believe in, of connection, of compassion. Those little acts are so key in changing the world. It may seem minuscule in the moment, but they matter. The idea of a symbol, as tackled through Garp, Ace, Roger, and most importantly for me, Whitebeard. The stylistic elements here, how this arc only is as powerful as it can be because of this being in this story. It's unbelievable stuff. And so now my character ranking. Oh boy, give me a second. Okay, I think we got the list. Yeah, we got a top 25. I had to. I can't make the character list go any higher than 25. From here, I promise it's not going to go any higher, but with a cast this sprawling, with how much Marineford elevated other characters that I hadn't thought would go as high as they did, yeah, top 25. But before I do so, there are the characters I think of that I think are still cooking a little bit, that I need a little bit more time to see how I feel about overall, but they're very interesting. Law, Kid, and Dragon. I enjoy them all a lot. The little bits we've seen, but not quite honorable mentions just yet. Want to see some more from them. Now, honorable mentions. Koza, Calgara, Iceberg, Lucci, Spandam, Mary, Cricket, Kuma, who is one of the most interesting characters to theorize about. So interesting for the plot. Dr. Vegapunk. Why is he... he was clearly a former revolutionary. What happened? What happened to him? His last will... sending off Luffy and the Straw Hats in a way that kind of helped them. He's so interesting. So interested about Kuma. Can't wait to see where he goes. He's an honorable mention. Mr. Tubon Clay, Hiraluk, Doflamingo, who has now worked his way into there, and Sengoku, who I find his perspective really interesting given what he is trying to protect here. And Kobe as well is an honorable mention. He represents so many interesting things. His growth is really, really palpable, and the anti-Straw Hat, or like the Straw Hat but on the other side, like his journey reflecting and his character reflecting the Straw Hats but on the other side, there's some symmetry to that I find to be genius. Now my top 25 is as follows. We have had a shakeup. Number 25, Rayleigh. Number 24, Mihawk. Number 23, Roger, Goldie Roger. Number 22, Aokiji. Mihawk and Aokiji, still like them a lot, love their presence here, but they didn't really have a ton to elevate them. Mihawk had some cool lines, Aokiji had some cool spreads. They didn't really elevate their character a ton for me, but it was cool to see them. And Aokiji still remains to this day one of the most morally interesting characters for me. Number 21 is Chopper. Number 20 is Sir Crocodile. He got a bit of a boost given his role here. Really enjoyed him in Marineford. Frankie's number 19. Blackbeard, I'm getting it. I'm really liking all that he's doing. Blackbeard's number 18. Jinbei, number 17. Love the direction of Jinbei. Sort of this mentor, but representing so much for the fishmen as well. Generally, and what's funny is he hasn't really been a focus just yet, but he's just consistently this kind of comforting presence, this empowering presence, this comforting presence, very likable, very endearing, while representing so much and being so wise, and I think his presence in Luffy's life will stand him in incredibly good stead. And what he represents for the fishmen, his connection to Ace as well, just he's great. Jinbei's great. Smoker's number 16, again, I really like him a lot, and because I like him, I wish he had a bit more this arc, but nonetheless, still number 16. Wipers 14, Noland is Wipers 15, Noland is 14, Buggy is 13, some nice additive stuff, but Impel Down was the Buggy arc. This added to him for sure, but yeah, I wouldn't say Marineford elevated him a lot, just continued, but Impel Down was a huge jump for Buggy. Number 12, Ace. After seeing all these flashbacks, seeing his death, yeah, Ace made quite a jump. Number 11 is Sanji. Number 10 is Brook. Number 9 is Shanks. A huge jump right back up. I don't care if he comes one chapter every 100 chapters or something like that. Every time he comes, he elevates the story so much. He represents so much. I'll stop gushing about him. I already did, but Shanks is number 9. It actually hurts for this character to be this low because I genuinely love her so much, but the cast has gotten so strong. Vivi number 8. Garp number 7. Garp is incredible. Nami number 6. Zoro number 5. Robin number 4. Usopp number 3. Luffy number 2. Whitebeard number 1. Whitebeard is, in my opinion, the best character in One Piece. My favorite. I don't imagine that'll remain my opinion throughout the series, but at this moment, having just experienced Marineford, everything he stood for, everything he did, the absolute legend, one of my favorite shonen characters ever. Whitebeard is, right now, my #1 favorite character in One Piece. Luffy #2, Usopp #3. That's what I got, guys. It is, what time is it? 2:11 a.m. I've been recording this all day and night, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this. This was a legendary arc, well worth the reputation it holds. It is one of my favorite shonen arcs. It goes up in the pantheon of one of the better shonen arcs of all time that I've experienced, ever. It's a select few in that pantheon, and it deserves it. It deserves it all. The heights that One Piece has reached, for me, I have never felt this close to this story. I've never loved it this much, and hopefully it goes from strength to strength. Now, like I said, I've read a lot of the post-war arc, that's just how this recording's shaken out, and I gotta say, it's really great. I can't wait to talk about it in the next video, and it does really go from strength to strength. That arc is amazing substance for a lot of the characters, but won't talk about it just yet. If you would actually like to watch that right now, you can do so by subscribing to my Patreon. You can watch my review of the post-war arc. For just $5 patrons, you can get early access for it right now. If you would like to see my continuing journey through One Piece, where I read every chapter on stream live, you can do so by following me on my Twitch account, which is linked in the description and pinned comment. You can also join the Discord, that has all sorts of great stuff, all sorts of discussions about my journey through One Piece, and I'm also actually starting my read-through through both Naruto and Bleach, both of which were awesome. The first 15-20 chapters of each I've done. I've chosen to go with Naruto first, so I'm actually starting a Naruto read-through. So if you're interested in that, we'll be doing that. Will I be doing videos on Naruto? More sparse if I do so. That's going to be more Patreon-specific things, or maybe my second channel sort of thing. One Piece is the priority for these sorts of videos, so I won't be doing these for Naruto stuff, but maybe we'll see if I can put something together. But Bleach is great too. I actually teared up at the Bleach stuff, and I definitely look forward to continuing that in the future. But, so yeah, if you're interested in my Naruto read-through, follow me on Twitch as well, because that's a thing now. And just like always, if you would like your comment to be highlighted in a future video, just use the hashtag AJPiece in your comment to give it a chance to be read out in a future video. Speaking of AJPiece comments, that section's coming up, so I'm not used to this being at the end of the video, but AJPiece comments coming up right here. For anyone who isn't interested in those, nothing personal, and if you're signing off right now, that's totally cool. Thank you very much for watching this, and I'll see you in the next one. But for everyone else who stays, AJPiece comments coming in right here. Hello, we are back with the AJPiece segment of this video. These are the AJPiece segments for this video. I don't expect this to be a regular thing to have these at the end. They just generally feel better for me at the beginning of the videos. But let me know how it is. Maybe you guys much prefer it to be at the end. I don't know. But these AJPiece comments were from the Amazon Lily video, which actually got plenty more comments than I assumed there would be. I figured because it was a shorter arc, a relatively transitionary one overall, that there might not be a ton of AJPiece comments, but there were quite a few, so thank you guys so much. The first one is from Nay Did, who brings up a lot of really interesting points. I'm not going to read out the whole thing just for the sake of time, but it's on screen in case you want to read the full comment. They bring up some interesting stuff about Nami and the comparison to Nami's tattoo and brand and how she recontextualizes it, changes the complexion of it given her new life purpose after she moves on. And the parallels with that and Boa and the Celestial Dragons and all that. I believe I mentioned that quite a bit in my Amazon Lily video, but the part I really wanted to hone in on is when they say, instead of accepting her past, Hancock tried to change how others viewed her. She was still shackled by trauma. Fisher Tiger only saved her physical body and not her soul. Still based, though. When Fisher Tiger saved the fishmen, he also helped them hope and find purpose. Unfortunately, there was no one to help Hancock like that. So when Hancock said, there are still men like you in this world, she must have been relieved as hell. She must have been waiting for someone like Fisher Tiger to appear, someone that could brighten her life by helping her accept the past. She became free through Luffy. For Hancock, Luffy must have been like a son. Yeah, we talked about Luffy being a son throughout the entire series, but I think it comes about very strongly in Amazon Lily through being this just ray of hope for Hancock, excuse me. Some interesting points about potentially why she could have this penchant for kicking animals, interesting stuff, but also A really cool detail here, and sad, her iconic move is named Slave Arrows. It only works for people who look at her in sexual ways. It's as if she created a move to defend her against her worst enemies, the Celestial Dragons. Thanks a lot for your content, AJ, they really helped me a lot. You're very welcome. And didn't even think about that, really. I was kind of thinking about, a lot of the backstory characterization and what Luffy means and his trauma and what he's going through and what Boa goes through and how they kind of coalesce, along with like hockey and some other details, but I didn't really think about the slave arrow specifically and what they mean, but that's very integrative and very sad, very tragic. It only works against people who look at her with lust or in sexual ways. Considering her background, it is a defense against the Celestial Dragons, considering the implications that are put forth in her background. Yeah, that is awful, but really good writing from Oda. Next is from Reddles, who says, I think it's worth noting that Hancock's backstory is the only one that Luffy's actually listened to. Normally, whenever a backstory comes up, Luffy will completely ignore it. Remember how he just wandered off when they were getting Nami's story, or how he didn't even know Chopper was a doctor. Maybe I'm reading too much into it since Hancock didn't really give him a choice about hearing the story, but it seems important. Also, it might not be canon, but I always assumed Hancock's devil fruit had a side effect of making her supernaturally effective. It would help explain why everyone immediately falls in love with her regardless of their own gender or orientation. We already saw Alvida become beautiful after eating a devil fruit, so it makes sense that the literal love fruit would have that sort of effect. I don't believe this is actually the only one that he's listened to. Just off the top of my head, I mean, he listened to Brooks' backstory, right? Bing Sake during the end of Thriller Bark. But I mean, it is notable that Luffy doesn't really care about backstories. Like it's a known element of his character that he doesn't really care about backstories when applying them to his current knowledge or feelings about the person. So I think it's notable regardless that he does listen to Hancock, because it isn't super common, even if it isn't exclusive to her. Yeah, for sure. I think he realized, given her background and given where she's come from, a lot of her actions right now, which he may find incomprehensible in a lot of ways, are informed by things he wouldn't be able to understand that can be explained through her backstory. So I think that's a lot of why he listened, and I think that isn't necessarily something he would do earlier in the story, so I think that's another example of his growing maturity. As for the idea that the devil fruit may have given her supernatural beauty, potentially. At the moment, I can't say whether or not I agree or disagree, but I can totally see where you're coming from for sure. Ginger Spice, again, for the sake of time, I won't read out the entire comment, but leaves a very, very profound and interesting and meaningful comment about their experiences with sexual assault. So just be aware of that in case you don't want to read it. In case that it may be triggering in any way. But regardless, thank you very much, Ginger Spice, for sharing. And a tidbit that I really want to hone in on is when they say, I can't remember if it's in the manga, but in the anime, one of Boa's sisters was very clearly had a trauma response and begins sobbing as Boa starts telling Luffy her story, and that was immediately what started pulling at my heartstrings. And then Luffy, bless him, says that Boa doesn't have to do this if she doesn't want to, because he can very clearly see that it's a painful thing for her to talk about. This is when I knew that Oda was going to treat this topic with the way it deserved to be treated. Think about it, how often do we see characters in shows say, hey, you don't have to tell me your backstory because I can tell it was traumatic for you? We don't even see that often in One Piece. Yeah, Luffy will sleep through some or will choose not to listen, but it's not until this episode that he straight up says that he didn't need to explain anything. Or that they didn't need to explain anything. They then go on to talk about the very visceral tactfulness with which Oda portrays this vulnerability that Boa felt, the weakness, the fear, and how they saw themselves reflected in Boa. Some of the subtext with how Amazon Lily came to be, the Kuja warriors, and the response to the weakness she felt being this strength, kind of the things we talked about in the video as well as the devil fruit stuff, which we kind of dwelt upon in an earlier message. But the last thing I want to talk about with this comment specifically is this does explain why she so readily falls in love with Luffy. I'm by no means defending her because there is quite a large age gap between the two. But I can understand why she feels such strong emotions towards not only the first person outside of the family or those who helped her become free to hear her story and see her past her looks and not look down on her for something she could not very well perceive as being her own fault, but also the first man to do so. While Oda can really struggle with writing some things without coming off as being a product of its time and feeling weird and gross, this whole arc and backstory is certainly not one of them and gives me hope that Oda can do better on those things in the future. I definitely agree. I think it was done with an immense amount of tactfulness and a striking honesty. It doesn't hold back on the trauma and the seriousness of all this sort of thing, and I think it's tactful in that it portrays it in a way that isn't super scathing or blunt, but it doesn't hold back at the same time at the effects of this sort of treatment, which is, I think, a really good combination for helping us sympathize with Boa. And, Hancock. I keep getting that wrong. So I totally agree. While there are some things throughout the story that I think could definitely be done with more sensitivity, whether or not it's a trope, whether or not it's a product of its time, that provides reasoning and context, but it doesn't excuse it for me. So while I will always criticize whenever I see something like that, and have done in the past and will continue to do in the future, though hopefully I don't have to in the future, it definitely should be pointed out when it's done really well. And here it's done very well, for a lot of the reasons that Ginger Spice explains. I think it was done really well in Impelled Down, for the reasons I talked about before. I think it's done really well in Amazon Lily. So thank you for your comment. Totally agree, and thank you for sharing. Both Medley Notations and TM brought forth the idea of Luffy's asexuality and how it's so kind of casually brought forth here. Mostly the fact that Luffy just really isn't interested in much sexually. It comes to the fore here because of his connection with Hancock and how it doesn't really seem to be defined by the lust that really is characteristic of most men and a lot of women as well, their interactions with her. But Luffy's different. He doesn't feel that way. And that is a huge contrast. I totally agree with TM with the way that it's kind of just so organically brought to the fore. I really enjoyed that. And Medley Notations asks whether I think he's just pure of heart, showing traits of being asexual, or both. I definitely don't think they need to be mutually exclusive. I think he is pure of heart just because of what we've seen throughout the series, and because of how compassionate and empathetic he was to Boa's situation, to Hancock's situation. And I think he's shown traits of being asexual as well. I don't know if I'd categorize it just yet. I think there have been periods of my life where I've just not been interested, really, romantically in anyone, sexually in anyone, just because of things going on during my life. It just wasn't it wasn't really one of my goals. It wasn't really something I focused on. And Luffy, at this point in his life, he's going on his adventure. He's one-mindedly focused on it. And that takes up a great amount of his time, his adventure and his bonds with his friends. Now, maybe that means that he doesn't have much room for romantic interest or sexual interest or anything like that. And maybe that means that he could grow that later. Having experienced that myself, like I said, I could totally see that, and he might not be asexual. He's just not interested right now. Regardless, I think it's really cool, especially as TM points out, that in a manga for young boys or teenage boys, for someone to show these traits that are not classically traditional cisgender heterosexual, that are a little bit different, are a little bit different to what you'd see in classic shonen, maybe a little bit new for a lot of people, a lot of the demographic, to experience a shonen character, specifically this badass main character who doesn't have what they would assume or associate with the classic sexual identity of their shonen protagonist. I think that's really cool, and I think the way it's casually brought in here is really interesting. Do I think he's asexual? I think he very well could be. I just don't know that it's confirmed for me just yet, just because these things are very dynamic, and I wouldn't put a term to it just yet, but definitely showing traits. Last couple. Brain Bruta says, there is some fun Japanese trivia that I'm paraphrasing and butchering, having to do with Fisher Tiger and the Celestial Dragons. There is a story and folk tale of a tiger living at the bottom of a mountain, at the top of which is the home of a dragon. The dragon, having always looked down at the tiger as it lives on the ground, became arrogant, thinking itself to be born better. Then no matter what the tiger did or how much pride and will it gained, the dragon was the ruler of this place. While the tiger just lived its life, the dragon started to taunt it, saying that it would never be as free as the dragon in the skies. But eventually, as the tiger was growing older and knew it was nearing the prime of its life, and its life's end, he climbed up the mountain, found the dragon's den where it could not run, and challenged it. It's a short poem or story I'd suggest checking out if you're interested in the ending. Obviously, the original is way better than anything I could write. Essentially, the tiger uses its life and will to kill the dragon, dying along with it. Just a fun bit of info that Oda added for his Japanese and literature friends. That is amazing! Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no clue. I love the cultural reference in there. And as far as I know, I don't think Fisher Tiger's whereabouts or fate is known. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe Boa said that he died, so maybe he could be dead. Considering where that story goes and how the tiger dies, kind of sacrificing itself to take down the dragon, to reverse this hierarchy in a way, to pull it up from the roots, maybe he did die or will die. Sorry, it's been quite a few weeks since I read this, so the specifics about Boa's backstory about Fisher Tiger are lost on me. Let me know if I'm making a mistake and if she did say whether or not he died, but I don't remember her saying so. And if so, maybe there's more to his story that we don't know. Maybe he did die, sacrificing himself in order to overthrow this hierarchy, or maybe he will die if he's still alive. Either way, really cool bit of context. Thank you so much. Katha B says, knowing that you've read past chapter 588, Boa's habit of kicking everything in her way seems familiar, doesn't it? While not completely an oppressor, Boa displays the from oppressed to oppressor by mimicking the celestial dragons to whom she was enslaved to. By doing this and saying that she's beautiful, while in Amazon Lily's strength is considered to be beauty, she creates a persona of a woman of a power that is untouchable, as are the celestial dragons. Luffy being Luffy made Boa open up about her trauma, which is a good starting point for healing, and she also becomes mellow as she spends more time with him. Yes, that is another little bit of very genuine, raw, honest storytelling with regards to trauma. As someone who has been at the mercy of the celestial dragons, that familiar kicking, right? No wonder she would recontextualize something that was the source of her trauma and use it to make herself feel powerful and in control. That is a very natural thing to do, to make yourself feel stronger, not feel subjugated. Take something that was a source of trauma and empower yourself. Now, obviously, it's not totally healthy. That's something that will need to be dealt with over time, and it's not perfect. So I'm not saying that Boa is justified to be doing these sorts of things, but nonetheless, it's so honest, so understandable, and hopefully she'll, like you kind of allude to, will be able to work through it. So yes, another little, really cool tidbit when it comes to Boa's character writing. Hancock's, sorry, I'm going to be calling her Boa all the time. It's just my brain. And last one's from Chronological. What I find really interesting about Boa is her insecurities. Having to suffer as a child at the hands of the celestial dragon shaped her in a lot of ways. I believe her way of making up for that is by putting on a type of mask. She acts spoiled, as if the world owes her everything, and that nothing is ever good enough for her. She kicks small animals, rejects some child's artwork, and refuses to listen to the government. But inside, she clearly has a lot of trauma, and decides to make up for that by being strong and powerful. And who does she consider to be the most powerful people? The Celestials. She hides her trauma and insecurities behind an attitude she considers powerful, which she backs up with her beauty, because she can't show herself as weak or lesser to anyone. But she's not evil, and Luffy sees this. When Luffy doesn't react to her the same way everyone else does, and actually immediately accepts her no matter what the past is and understands her emotions, she finally finds someone who sees her for her. He doesn't respect or lust over her like everyone else, but simply sees her as an individual. This is why she falls for Luffy. Thank you for reading my comment. Hope you continue enjoying. Keep up with your incredible videos. Thank you. Now, this in tandem with kind of what Ginger Spice talked about earlier. It totally makes sense. Contextualizing all of this, it makes sense why Amazon Lily is the way it is. It makes sense why Hancock is the way she is. It makes sense why she interacts with people and men, what her powers indicate, indirectly, subtextually. She's just top to bottom a really well executed character, and honestly, I don't think I included her in my honorable mentions for this video. She should have been. She should have been. So add that in there. I'll put it in the text. But Boa's genuinely very well designed. So yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting nuance to Boa. Thank you guys for sharing, because you guys help increase my appreciation for her. Anyways, those are the end of the AJPiece comments. Thank you so much everyone for submitting. If you would like to be entered in a future video, just be sure to use the hashtag AJPiece, and you'll be entered into a pool for a future video. I guess that ends this video, guys. If you stuck with me all the way, thank you very much. And just to repeat what I said at the end of the last segment, for anyone who continued watching all the way to the end, end, including the AJPiece. If you would like access to the next video, early access, which will be the post-war arc, you can do so on Patreon under the $5 tier for early access. If you would like to follow me on Twitch to watch me read every single chapter live, some VODs will be on Patreon. I think the entirety of Marineford I will put on Patreon once it expires on Twitch, for $10 tier, I believe. Anyways, if you would like that, you can follow me on Twitch. If you want to watch me read through Naruto as well, that could be lots of fun. You can follow me on Twitch for that. I'm playing through Disco Elysium right now. I'm kind of close to the end, I think. In the future, there will be some Yakuza 0, Tears of the Kingdom, Final Fantasy XIV, Outer Wilds, stuff like that. Other Final Fantasies as well. So if you're interested in that sort of content, by all means, check out the Discord if you want to know things about the stream schedule or videos. You can also follow me on Twitter for updates, very similarly, if you want to know what I'm going through, just generally day-to-day stuff. And yeah, AJPiece comments as well. All that. Thank you guys for sticking with me. I sincerely hope you enjoyed. I thoroughly enjoyed making this myself. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. And thank you so much as always for the support, for the comments, for the enthusiasm, and for everything. Many thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.